What's your motive?
I know, this is a setup.
Machiavelli.
Good evening to everyone. I'd like to call the Monday, March 26, 2022 meeting of the Falls Church City Council to order. I'd ask that you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all.
Yes, sir. Ms. Conley?
Here.
Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Ms. Hardy?
Here.
Ms. Leon?
Here.
Ms. Shansiska is on her way. We'll let you know when she gets here. Mr. Snyder?
Here.
And Mayor Tarter?
Here.
Thank you, Council.
Looks like we got a bit of an echo. I don't know if there's anyone, maybe even on joining us remotely, who might want to hit mute on their microphones. Anyway, thank you. All right, so let's get on with our meeting. First order of business would be adoption of a meeting agenda. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt the meeting agenda.
All right, do we have a second? All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. So now let's move on to proclamations. And we have a first proclamation is declaring April 3rd through the 9th Library Week. And our library liaison, Ms. Conley, is going to do the honors. Ms. Conley?
Whereas libraries, including Mary Riley Stiles Public Library, are accessible and inclusive places that foster a sense of connection and build community, and libraries connect people to technology, providing access to broadband internet, computers, and training that are critical for accessing education and employment opportunities. And libraries offer opportunities for everyone to connect with new ideas and become their best selves through access to multimedia content, programs, and classes, in addition to books. And today's libraries and their services extend far beyond the four walls of a building, and everyone is welcome to use their resources. And in times of crisis, libraries and library professionals play an invaluable role in supporting their communities, both in person and virtually. And libraries strive to develop and maintain programs and collections that are as diverse as the populations they serve and ensure equity of access for all. And to adapt to our changing world, libraries are expanding their resources and continuing to meet the needs of their patrons. And libraries have long served as trusted and treasured institutions for all members of the community, regardless of race, ethnicity, creed, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity, or socioeconomic status. And libraries are cornerstones of democracy, promoting the free exchange of information and ideas for all. And libraries, librarians, and library workers are joining library supporters and advocates across the nation to celebrate National Library Week.
Now therefore, be it resolved that I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, proclaim April 3rd through 9th, 2022 as Library Week, and April 5th, 2022 as Library Workers' Day in the City of Falls Church, and encourage all residents to connect with their library and library workers by visiting online or in person to access resources, services, and provide words of gratitude and support to library staff. So thank you to all our great library staff and our wonderful four-star library here in Falls Church. Do we have anybody in the audience from the library? If not, we're going to congratulate all of them and thank them for the wonderful work they do day in, day out here in the City of Falls Church. And let's move on now to oaths of office. Madam Clerk, are there any oaths of office? And there she comes, right on cue, or a moment. Here we go. We got your library proclamation right here. So I don't know if you'd like to come forth and receive it, but we're just singing the praises of the library here in Falls Church, and thank you for the great work you all do. So you're welcome to come forward and receive this if you'd like. I don't know if anybody wants to take a photo, but we can certainly do that as well.
Moved a little bit, yeah, and then Mr. Duncan that way a little bit. Yep, you're good. I just need to see Mr. Duncan. One, and one more. You good, Nick? Okay.
All right, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jenny.
Okay, oaths of office. Madam Clerk, what you got?
I do have several oaths of office today. Let's see, we have a bunch of new board members. First, we're going to start with Allison Miller for the Urban Forestry Commission. Just come up here and just raise your right hand.
Yep.
It's on. I think I got it. Yep. Do you, Allison Miller, solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon you as a member of the Urban Forestry Commission according to the best of your ability, so help you God?
I will.
Okay, and you are sworn in. Thank you. And we have Alan Greenberg next for Historic Architectural Review Board. Thank you. So we can just raise your right hand. Do you, Alan Greenberg, solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon you as a member of the Historic Architectural Review Board according to the best of your ability, so help you God?
I will.
Thank you, and you are sworn in, and you can assume your duties on the board. And next, we have Christine Ward for the Board of Zoning Appeals. Do you, Christine Ward, solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon you as a member of the Board of Zoning Appeals according to the best of your ability, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, and you are sworn in as well. And we have one more. I think Deborah Roth is on Teams. Oh, there she is. Are you ready?
Hi.
Ms. Roth, hi.
Yes. Hi.
All right. Can you raise your right hand for me? Do you, Deborah Z. Roth, solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon you as a member of the Human Services Advisory Council according to the best of your ability, so help you God?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. And you're all set. And everybody who took their oath today is ready to assume their duties, and we really do appreciate all of your volunteer work and everything you do for this city.
We'd love to invite you up, if you will, and to receive congratulations from council if you'd like. Yes, sir.
I didn't realize I needed to send a notice that I was
Oh.
here.
Sure, are you Mr.
Stu
Cross?
Whitaker?
Yes, okay, yeah. I have you right here if you'd like to come up.
Thank you.
I didn't even have to look at it, I knew exactly where it was. And Mr. Whitaker is joining the Citizens Advisory Committee on Transportation. Oh, and just, can I ask you a question quick? Are you okay with swearing and so what you got? Is that okay with you? Okay, thank you. If you can raise your right hand. Do you, Stuart Whitaker, solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon you as a member of the Citizens Advisory Committee on Transportation, according to the best of your ability, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, another one. Yay. This-
Tatiana Eads.
And Ms. Eves is joining the Environmental Sustainability Council. Do you, Tatiana Eves, solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon you as a member of the Environmental Sustainability Council, according to the best of your ability, so help you God?
I will.
Thank you, and you're all set too. And I think the mayor was going to say,
I was just going to invite all our new appointees up front to receive our congratulations and thanks in person, if you'd be interested. And invite anyone else to join the boards and commissions. As you can see, it's quite an important and popular thing to do, so.
if you have any interest, you can always email cityclerk@fallschurchva.gov, and we can give you some information, or go to our website.
Great, great.
Hold on just a second.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let us know if you need anything. Good to meet you all. Good to meet you. Thanks for not tripping.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
could I just say a word? I just want to recognize the work of the Appointments Committee in bringing all these fine folks before us. Appointments Committee is one of the more low-profile but extremely busy and important committees that we have of council. Just want to thank the members of the Appointments Committee for doing the work that brings these folks to us.
All right, great point. Yes, of course, Ms. Conley?
And also the work of our Deputy City Clerk, Veronica Prince, who corresponds with all of the applicants and makes sure that the Appointments Committee knows what they're doing, which is really important.
Thank you. She'll appreciate that.
All right, let's move on now to receipt of public comment. Madam Clerk, you want to start with summary of written comments?
Sure. Let's see what we have. So we had some comments on the Founders Row 2 public hearing for this evening. Edward Quill, a resident near the site of Founders Row 2, wrote to express concern over the potential impact of the project on both automobile traffic and especially on parking. Michael Trauberman, a member of the Environmental Sustainability Council, suggested a technical edit to the voluntary concessions regarding baseline energy performance to align with LEED requirement language. The Environmental Sustainability Council said that the latest Founders Row 2 application showed that the developer might combine rooftop solar generation and building efficiency in order to satisfy a metric that the ESC has viewed as solely an efficiency goal. The ESC cautioned against this approach and provided alternate approaches that would fully support the city's greenhouse gas emission control goals and correctly calculate these numbers in the analysis of this and all special exception requests. On the budget, Andrew Reeves asked that in light of the large increase in real estate assessments, that those tax rates be substantially reduced. The Human Services Advisory Council forwarded recommendations for awarding community services funds in FY23. I'm going to check this mic. I'm getting the feedback. Members of the Board of Elections wrote in support of funding the full-time Deputy Director of Elections position in the FY23 budget. Jean Gresco requested year-to-year metrics and variance analyses on the key residential property tax drivers as part of the review of the FY23 budget. Greg Anderson urged City Council to expand investments in affordable housing, including auxiliary dwelling units and additional supports for individuals experiencing poverty, in environmental programs for climate change adaptation, and diversity, equity, justice, and inclusion efforts, including creating and funding a new citywide race and equity commission to address historical and current inequities in our community. In other comments, Sean Dakin asked that the city look into creating a regulation that required buildings that are closed or out of business to cover themselves with a wall instead of chain link fencing, and provided photos of the closed Stratford Motor Lodge. Linda Walter Kamel forwarded a report about a plan to make Paris a city where every service needed is available to residents within a 15-minute walk or bike ride, and suggested it was a good idea for Falls Church. Robert Bartolotta provided the Virginia Career Works Northern Workforce Development Board notes for March, and he is the city's representative on that board. And that was it for the written comments.
All right. Let's move on to the receipt of public comment. And so anyone in the audience, if you have not filled out a speaker slip but you desire to speak, you're certainly welcome to, either now or when the item you're here to speak about is up. That's up to you. We would just ask that you fill out one of the speaker slips found in the foyer and hand it to the clerk. When your time comes, if you'd be so kind as to keep your comments to 3 minutes and to state your name and address for the record. We also have one speaker who's joining us by video link. I'm going to start with him. That's Andrew Olson. Are you on the line, Mr. Olson?
Yes, hello.
Hello. Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
It's your turn, so you're welcome to speak.
All right, thank you. It's good to see many of you again. Sorry I can't be there in person. Just wanted to thank everyone for the continued great support of more bicycle infrastructure in the city and the progress on Lincoln Avenue and Dorchester crosswalks. The new Lincoln paving is quite an improvement. And so thank you to the council and staff for all that help there. As we come into the budget season, I just wanted to speak live very briefly about the issue of additional staff for bicycle and pedestrian improvements. I think we all know that there are many things we can do and have been discussing in the city, like crosswalks at the WNOD, neighborhood traffic calming, and our staff is amazing and has been great to work with, and also they're stretched very thin. So as you're considering the budget, I just urge you to think about having the space for someone with both the capacity, the mandate, and the experience to continue to push bicycle and pedestrian improvements, because I think these are things that many of our residents will value. And my survey of Lincoln Avenue, I found that half of residents had biked and 90% had walked somewhere in the past couple of months. So it's an area that is important to, I think, many people. And there's money out there, there's development going on, there's projects going on, and I think we have the potential to miss a lot of opportunities and put concrete in places that will lock in things for a generation. And so as we're doing this development and as we have all these projects going, now is the time to either have the staff, whether permanent or contractor, to help make sure we do those designs right this time around. And the Founders 2 on the agenda tonight is a great example. Our bicycle master plan suggests that there should be a review of bicycle infrastructure along the routes that it crosses. That wasn't done. I don't think anyone on staff has time to do that. That's something we set up for ourselves and have not followed through on because we don't have the people to go do it. I think this, as we've said in the policy statements from CACT and ESC and Planning Commission, these are things that will help with the development, help with the traffic that was just mentioned, and help build this place up as a place that's even more community-centric, healthier, more environmentally friendly. So urge you to consider that as you think about the budget tonight and as we think about projects going forward. And happy to connect offline and continue this conversation with anyone in council, the public, or staff.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Our next speaker is Patrick Cronin. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Patrick Cronin. I live at 415 Lincoln Avenue here in the city. I am also a member of the Mary Riley Stiles Public Library Board of Trustees. And my comments, excuse me, this evening do not reflect the board itself and are not on behalf of the board. However, I would like to note that given it is library week on this coming next week, and the budget cycle is here, the board did approve a request that the library director made to have an increase in FTEs. And I think it's worth noting that this city, in terms of its staff, has hemorrhaged staff members, except in one department, and that's the library. And I believe that that's a reflection of the leadership of our library director. And so when this esteemed director asks for money in order to increase her needs at the library, I think you, as council members, should grant that, especially since the board approved that request. So I would like to make a bifurcated comment. That's my first one. Totally removed from that. As a citizen on Lincoln Avenue, this past Saturday at 1 a.m., a car was flipped, and that was due to excessive speed. And I was out there when a field sobriety test was being given on the driver, and I don't know the result of that. I also don't know the result of the investigation by the police. But I do believe that the driver struck a parked car and that car flipped. Again, I haven't read the final investigation. But that wouldn't be possible if there were hard either medians or bump outs on Lincoln Avenue in order to slow the speed of cars. And I do know that since Saturday at 1 a.m., the Falls Church City Police have been out on Lincoln where they haven't been since before we got a crosswalk on the regular. And they're out there to slow speed, to check speed, and to pull over speeding drivers. So I do think we could do a little more on Lincoln Avenue to slow down traffic and not have flipped cars. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We have another speaker, Joyce Mitchell. Come on down, welcome.
I'd like to reinforce Mr. Olison's request to hire a bicycle. I'd like to reinforce Mr. Olison's request to hire at least a part of a bicycle traffic engineer, because, I mean, I think in your hearts you are trying to do the right thing. The new bridge on East Falls Church on the bike path is wonderful, and you do espouse wanting bicycle and to encourage bicycle and pedestrian safety. But I walk and I bike a lot around Falls Church, and I used to feel comfortable going down West Street. But since you've done the bump outs, and it forces, because I'm going off peak hours usually, now I'm forced into the traffic lane, and I'm much more nervous on West Street. And I just think if you had a bicycle traffic engineer, you could do things that are pro-pedestrian and pro-bike. This is a group that, these are not natural, you can do both. So I hope you hire that bike traffic engineer. I mean, I read the information in the last document about Founders Row, and there's a lot about timing for traffic lights and getting traffic to flow, and they're talking about car traffic. And there's a little bit about, we'll have bike traffic and we'll encourage our employees to bike to work. But you need things about the roads. given us protected space on the roads. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Are there any other public speakers at this time? Okay, let's keep going then. Up next is the annual report of the Economic Development Authority. Mr. Bob Young.
Good evening, Council, members of the public. I'm pleased to be able to present this annual report. You have a lot of slides in the deck. No? Okay. I'm not going to read them, and I'm going to go through them fairly quickly. Next slide, please. I wanted to start off by making sure the members of the public are aware of the members of the EDO staff and the members of the EDA. And while doing that, I want to point out that Ed Salzberg joined the EDA in 1981. He's been on it for 41 years and continues to be a major contributor. He's not only our corporate memory, but he always has ideas, and I want to publicly thank Ed for his service and all the other members. The EDO staff couldn't be better. They could use more help, but you know that. I must tell you that it's not at all unusual when Becky or Val or Renee are on leave or on vacation, or it's the weekend. I still get the emails. I still get the phone calls. These folks work their heart out, and I hope everyone in public and you all appreciate that. Next slide, please. This is a list of the projects I'm going to go through very quickly, things that we've done recently and things that we hope to do during the next year. Next slide, please. As you're all well aware, and lots of emails later and text messages, we are completing the wayfinding project. It consists of 45 new signs, a couple of which still need to be put up. And we still need to fix a couple of glitches, but overall, I'm proud to say I think it's an excellent program, and I think it'll be much appreciated over time by the city. The original budget for this project, I'll point out, was $550,000. It was completed for $350,000 of EDO funds. Next slide, please. It's just a quick illustration of what they look like and a note regarding fixing some of the ADA issues that have arisen as a result of the signs being put up. I want to note at this point, next slide, please. I want to note before I go on to the Tinner Hill signs that we all want to be compliant when it comes to ADA and pay special attention to it, and we're doing that. At the same time, we have gross violations of ADA in the city. We're all aware of them. We know where they are. The EDO has done surveys, the EDA and the EDO done surveys. I've been for about 15 years asking that the city fix the problem in front of Vito's. It still hasn't happened. So I want to ask once again, we know what needs to be done, we know how it needs to be done, we just need to do it. So I would implore council and staff to get that done. Quite a bit of effort was put in by staff to get some signs done to celebrate and point out our Tinner Hill heritage. I think these signs are really excellent and will help folks, not only visitors, but locals, to find the many places where we can celebrate the Tinner Hill tradition. Next slide, please. Council, of course, is aware of the $450,000 fund, which was granted by council to the EDA to fund small business grants. That program is ongoing. We'll probably do a second round here pretty soon. I think it closed last Friday, I think. So we'll be looking at the applications and seeing where we need to go from here. Undoubtedly be adjusting criteria. My own feeling is that we have a lot of businesses, for example, that receive grants but could really use another round. They're excluded presently. So we'll see how that goes and consult with council as we move forward. One of the next things that we hope to do with those ARPA funds is outdoor dining parklets. Staff has identified a couple of places, I think, on South Washington. And our hope also is to expand Mr. Brown's Park into the old alley there, which is quite a mess. And we think it's important to get that incorporated into the park. I must tell you that one of the things I'm most proud of is Mr. Brown's Park. And I think we all ought to be aware of how that all came about, the efforts made and the vision of Mike Novotny that he worked very, very hard on, and then Jim Snyder picking up the ball and running with it despite all the obstacles put in his way. We were able to get that done, and we sure hope that we'll be able to get it expanded in short order. We have a plan for a small business technical liaison, and we hope to be able to, again, with ARPA funds, hire a marketing consultant. We believe on the EDA that the city hasn't done a great job of marketing itself. We've made some recent upgrades with Renee coming on staff, however temporarily, and we think that a much better job can be done, and we plan to get that done. Next slide. You all on council are well aware of the efforts the EDO has made and the EDA on Virginia Village. This all happened as a result of Councilmember Hardy taking a stroll or maybe a run on a Saturday afternoon. That was not much over a year ago, and we've gone from the city owning 1 unit to the city owning and the EDA owning 5 units. I find this to be a very exciting project. I hope it's not the only one, but we think that we have great opportunities here to, with the funds that we have, to be able to buy more units. And my hope is to come up with a real plan. Here's how we can do something in the relatively short run and have a plan for the long run as well. The plan, of course, revolving around affordable housing, what I hope will be a mix of market rate and affordable units and some public areas as well. Next slide, please. This is a really important area, the fiscal model update. You all will recall, and the public might not know, that the EDA many, many years ago initiated this project. This is a fiscal model that allows the city staff to assess the likely contributions of new projects in the city. It's continuously refined every year or two. This year we have been able to add a new separate economic impact module that allows staff to figure out not only the direct contribution in the way of taxes to the city's coffers, but the indirect secondary and tertiary results of people moving into the city, shopping, going to restaurants, and so on. The updated model is now in-house by only a few days, and as we go forward, staff will be producing for council to help with your decisions on the new projects that are on the table or to come in the future. Next slide, please. Our EDA member, Jim Coyle, who sits right over there, some year or so ago initiated the idea that we ought to be looking into historical tourism in the city. And what we're trying to do is combine his ideas and his explorations, his work on this, to come up with a much improved way for people to come to the city, know what they're going to be able to see. That involves tying in with state level websites and so on. The Virginia Tourism Corporation website that we've been able finally to link into, Falls Church has been absent forever from that site, so we think this will help, particularly with hotels and restaurants, and generally speaking with tourism in the city. So I want to thank Jim for his work on that. Next slide. I want to thank council for providing ARPA funds to bring Renee on board. She's a wonderful, wonderful addition to the staff, working well with Val and Becky, and really doing tremendous work. We hope that we'll be able to make that a permanent position in the not-too-distant future. But as you've seen, if you look on the choosefallschurch.org site, that it's been updated finally. She's created a landing page for the city and listings for city attractions. All of this, we think, will incrementally, in its own small way, be able to increase visitors to the city and therefore income for the city. Next slide, please. This is the EDA work plan. I won't go through each of the things. You can all see that, and I know that this presentation will be available to the public on our website in some form or fashion. So that's good. Any questions on our work plan, I'd be happy to answer. The following couple of slides, no really need to put them up. They're the EDA's and EDO's attempt to give council some data on how other EDAs are funded in our region. That's all preliminary to us suggesting to you that in fairly short order, the EDA is likely to come forward to council with a request for annual funding for the EDA. We think we've proven that we can get the work done. We can be nimble and quick. I can't give you an amount because nobody knows what that request is going to be right now, but I want to promise you it'll be coming forward. Thanks very much for your attention. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Young, and thank you for the rest of your EDA members. You've got an extraordinary group, and you've done some great things these past few years in particular, so we're much appreciative of that. Let's go see if people have any questions or comments for you right now. Anyone have any questions or comments? Ms. Hardy?
Thank you. I've had the privilege of being your council liaison for the past 6 years, so thank you for the really strong partnership. I think from what I've observed, you definitely are nimble and creative and energetic group, and so we really appreciate your leadership on all the different things you shared tonight. A couple requests. So one, when we've figured out all the ADA stuff with the new wayfinding signs, it'd be great to go out and do a ribbon cutting and officially celebrate them. I think now that we're back in person, I think it's a nice thing to recognize. We've heard mostly good feedback about it. Second one is, something that I think council has interest in and probably aligns really well to the marketing items in your work plan is focusing on our business processes and how to welcome new businesses into the city. I think there's desire among council to look at all the different ways that our citizens and residents and businesses interact with local government and how to improve that and make it more efficient. And to your point, the better we do that, the faster they open, that's better for them and better for the city. So if that's something that perhaps GovOps takes on or somewhere else in city council, we'd love to partner with the EDA on that as well.
Thank you very much for those comments, particularly the second one. I have a lot of personal experience in that area, and I hope that we can work with you, Councilmember Hardy, and with staff in particular. We think that on the whole, much of the problem in the process for getting businesses open has to do with the software. And, you know, we have a Munis system. Doesn't seem to work very well. There are many other systems out there, and I'm hoping that staff, perhaps with backing from council, will be able to maybe create whole new processes, because trying to fix what we have is difficult at best. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Ms. Hiscott?
Thank you. I just wanted to echo support for Letty's comments. First of all, thanking the EDA for all the work that you've done, especially in the area of affordable housing and in marketing the city and defining our borders, if you will, with the wayfinding signs. Also wanted to express support for continuous process improvement on our systems for applying for a permit, whether that's applying for a permit or working to pay a bill, you know, learning how we can best actuate a system that is a better user interface to, because the first thing that a citizen sees or a potential citizen or business sees is our website. And if you're applying for a job, applying for a permit, for residential or commercial, that's your first interaction with the City of Falls Church. And I think we have a lot of opportunity to make that an easier process. So I look forward to working with the EDA and staff and other council members on how to best improve that process so everybody can see all the hard work that's happening behind the scenes. So thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Ms. Leon?
Bob, thank you. I think the work that you and your team do represents a certain level of agility, you know, to complement government functions in the spaces that I think that we value when we want to be in a forward posture on. I did have a question, particularly on page 13, just looking for clarity around what funding you get today. It's not zero, right? Because you put every jurisdiction there except us. So.
There is no dedicated funds for the EDA. Several years ago, we were able to get the TOT tax increased from 5 to 6%. And those funds are not directly available at the EDA. Historically, council has, those funds go into the general fund. And the EDA is allowed to spend those funds on beautification and increasing in the downtown, whether it be benches or flowers or whatever. That comes from hotel taxes. Historically, it was about $100,000 a year, and then it went down to, I don't know, maybe 25. It's up, I believe the projection is about 75,000 for next year. So we can spend those funds with the approval of council only. What I'm hoping is that in addition to those funds, we can get a yearly allocation where we can actually go out and get some things done reasonably quickly. The word nimble keeps being used. I think that's appropriate. So that's the intention, to try to get some number allocated by council on an annual
Thank you.
Mr. Snyder, then Mr. Duncan.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your work at all the folks connected with EDA. So 2 questions. First of all, the past year, could you provide a list of new businesses that were brought here as a direct result of the EDA's activity? And then in terms of your 2022 work plan, what's your projection about new businesses that can be brought here, as well as the commercial tax revenue yield? Thank you.
I'll try to address those. The first one is basically that would be impossible. We have no way to trace, well, every once in a while you get a direct ask to the EDO staff, and they're able to help those businesses through. But typically, that's not what happens. We believe that the EDA's efforts and the EDO's efforts bring businesses to the city, but it's not directly traceable. But I think the bottom line is what's important, and that is the vacancy rate in the city across all uses, but especially retail and office, isn't zero, but it's darn close to it. What was the second one, Councilman Snyder?
The second question related to the work plan for next year.
I'm sorry? Can't hear you.
How do we determine success of the work plan next year in terms of bringing in businesses and commercial tax revenue?
I think there are ways to do that. Again, a lot of the effects will be indirect, but I'll be working with EDO staff to try to be able to document to the extent possible the EDA's efforts and the results thereof. So I think that's a good idea.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Duncan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to thank the EDA for helping us knit together the effort for economic redevelopment. We were reminiscing about how things were back when Ed Salzberg was a freshman member of the EDA in the
1981.
There you go. It's a while back. And, you know, at the time, the EDA was sort of a separate entity, had its own office space. I mean, it was a separate entity almost, and City Council was involved, of course, in economic development, but not nearly to the degree that now we have all come to just take for granted. And the EDA's role in bringing together the schools and the council and the Chamber of Commerce and staff has been very instrumental in the progress that we've seen here in recent years and the progress that is to come. So thank you for that. I did want to respond to your appeal for the Beto's situation to be relieved. I agree with that, and we have talked about that, and I think wheels are turning. Never fast enough, but we are aware that that is an issue that needs to be addressed. And finally, my hobby horse is that at some point I would love us to see our way through to finding some element of Falls Church's history that could be announced on the interstate highway sign at exit 66 off I-66 that would take you into ye olde Falls Church. Like so many jurisdictions in the Commonwealth, you know, there are signs pointing towards heritage tourism sites that, you know, attract attention and help build buzz in the community for the heritage story and for economic growth related to it, hotels and restaurants and so forth. So I haven't got any bright idea about what it would be, but I would love to see some combination of the Falls Church or Cherry Hill or some element. The Tenor Hill story seems to me to be worthy of going through the state process of getting a historical signage on the interstate that differentiates Falls Church from just another suburb outside of D.C. Anyway, thank you. I think all of us do our own ear on the ground kind of work as far as Mr. Snyder's questions, which are good questions. Anytime a new business opens, I always try to go to the proprietor and how to go. How was it opening a business in Falls Church? And almost invariably, the first person they mention is Becky Witzman, who just does, you know, terrific work helping especially our small businesses, you know, navigate the difficulties of permits and construction and so forth. But just generally the climate, the nurturing atmosphere that the EDA helps create and that we on council and others try to sustain with the chamber has been instrumental in taking us where we are today and where we hope to go in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's a wonderful idea, and we'll certainly be looking into it.
All right, Ms. Conley?
Just a quick repetition of thank you for all that the EDA does. And you are very activist EDA, and there's always something that you're thinking of. So I do appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I'm really excited about the Tourism and City History Initiative that Mr. Coyle is leading. I think that is as Mr. Duncan says, that's a great way to really bring people into Falls Church to celebrate our history, and to be able to do that outreach through the Virginia Tourism website is something that has been missing. So thank you for that as well. And I know everyone on council would be happy to help in any way to get the word out, to get people to come to Falls Church, to shop, to eat, to visit, to learn about history. So thank you.
Very welcome. I'm hoping that one of the items on our list is to see if we can involve some of the high school students, those who serve on various boards and commissions as student youth representatives. Our representatives on the EDA have done wonderful things, and I know of others, and it would seem to me that high schoolers should be able to help with the research, help with the ideas. Young people seem to have, particularly when it comes to social media, a little better idea than those of us who didn't grow up with it. So thank you for that.
All right. Well, again, our thanks to you. We look forward to further collaboration. You've been very successful. We look forward to lots of great things coming up in the future. So thanks so much. All right, let's move on to council requests. Are there any council requests? Ms. Hardy?
Thank you. I wanted to be responsive to the public comment we received about Lincoln Avenue. Wyatt, do you have an update on what happened at that accident? I know that we spent 2 weeks ago, we spent time talking about kind of the near-term project to work on improving the crosswalks with RRFBs, and then hopefully the long-term project, the grading of Lincoln. But in the interim, is there anything we can do to address the speeding issue in light of the accident we heard about?
Well, we certainly are increasing our patrol presence on Lincoln Avenue, and I appreciate Chief Gavin and Captain Marcus Bristol's response to the concerns that we've been hearing from Lincoln Avenue. So that is a visible presence that we will try to sustain. I will also, just on the details of this accident, I will find out from the chief what I can share with the city council, and I'll do so.
Great. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is tonight we are up on our docket towards the end of the night is approving appointments to the Public Utilities Commission will be for the newly reconstituted PUC. And so if you could give us a briefing on next steps and when the meeting happens, and just to keep us aware, that would be great. Thank you.
All right, other council requests. My calendar shows yesterday was Mr. Z's birthday, so I wonder if we could just take a quick moment of silence for our dear departed friend Dan. All right, are there other council requests for Mr. Shields? If not, why don't we go on, and I guess the report of the city manager. Do you have a report tonight, Mr. Shields, or are you yielding the floor to our friends on the school board?
So, Mayor Tarter, tonight is budget presentation night, and as our city clerk has laid it out on the agenda, we have the school board going first to present the budget, and then I will follow behind that, if that's the pleasure of council, in that order. And so let me, if I may, turn it over to Superintendent Noonan and Chair of the School Board, Ms. Laura Downs, and they will provide a briefing to the City Council on the school board budget request.
All right, welcome.
Thank you. This is my assistant, Dr. Peter Noonan.
Happy to be here.
Thank you all for having us this evening. On behalf of the school board, the superintendent, and his staff, I want to thank you again for having us this evening. The school board has worked hard on this budget, but I know that it's only a small component of your much larger budget. And we understand you have a lot to consider as you address the needs of the city and its residents, and we just thank you for your support and your partnership. We're going to get started. I know that in advance we sent you these slides, so I'm going to briefly skim over them so that any public members that are watching, they will be able to see the slides. But I know that you all have seen them in advance, so I won't go too in depth. Okay, and some of you may remember our placemat from a couple years ago. This is our updated placemat, and as you'll see, the center is our students, always our students. And you'll see in terms of our mission, our 3 pillars, IB for all, equity, which is our closing our gaps, and then our promoting a caring culture. So IB for all, when we talk about that, That's even though when students are not taking on the IB diploma track, all of our students take IB courses, so we really are IB for all. And it's very timely because we just had IB here last week assessing our program, and we passed with flying colors. And right now they're here this week assessing the elementary schools IB program. And so that's an exciting time for us. There we go. We are in the middle of a strategic planning initiative that kicked off in August, and right now we're towards the end at the design and launch phase. What's really impressive about this is we had over 1,000 individuals participate in the feedback gathering component through focus groups and town halls and surveys. And what came of that is, oops, sorry. There we go. What came of that is we came up with some core values, focusing on academic success, being student-centered, inclusion and belonging, responsive and accountable, and community and connection. And from there, we developed focus areas. And so the first is IB-infused teaching and learning. And as I said before, we are right now going through a self-study process with IB. Inclusion, belonging, and wellness. And this is something that our participants said that this was very important to them, that we included inclusion, belonging, and wellness. Resource management, continuous improvement, communication and engagement, and investing in our people. And here we are, our beautiful high school. This is the hype tunnel. My son is actually on there. He's towards the back. He's a big guy, not so fast, so he's towards the back. This is our hype tunnel, though, and we want to thank the city council. Whoops. Sorry, went ahead. We want to thank the City Council for your partnership on this. We, not only was this, one of the things that I think got sort of overshadowed during COVID was that this beautiful building was delivered on time and actually under budget by our superintendent, especially impressive during COVID. And in fact, we came in $100,000 under budget, and that money will be returned to the general government. And so looking at our FY22 approved revenue and expenditures, sort of as we've seen over the years, the same numbers we are, in terms of our expenditures, our revenue, we see 81.5% coming from our local revenue from our city. And looking at our expenditures, we see 86% of our expenditures coming in, going towards salaries and benefits. And here we have a chart on enrollment. And if to just go over this, and I know you've all seen these numbers, so I won't go too in depth, but our enrollment as of September 2021, which is what our the state aid is based on, was 2,500 and 2, which is down about 14 from the previous year. But that's still, we haven't returned to our pre-COVID numbers, so we're still about 160 students off. We actually, this number might be a little bit higher because you may know that we welcomed, it might be more, but I know it's at least 12 families from Ukraine over the past couple weeks, so that number actually might be a little bit higher.
Actually above, at this point, last year's enrollment.
So we're above this, yep, so that's just from September, and that was the numbers we sent to the state, so we are above. And here's just giving you an idea of what we're seeing around the region. It's most of Northern Virginia has seen drops over the past 2 years. And you'll see that ours has, more recently, has started to become more flat and not quite as pronounced there. What's interesting about this slide is even though our enrollment has been sort of flat and declined a little bit since COVID, you'll see that under students with disabilities, we've actually had an increase in the proportion of those students. So that's something that we still need to really keep in mind. What is nice, what's helpful about that is that when we had a reduction in students, we did not reduce the number of our special education staff. So we feel confident that we'll still be able to serve those students. Okay, and then factors in impacting FY23 projections. Looking at the Weldon Cooper, that's the company or the firm we use to project our population or where our student population will be. And what we're seeing is that since 2016, there was a decline in the number of families moving into the city, and that's really was causing some of our enrollment to decline even before the pandemic. Over the next decade, we anticipate that there'll be a decline in births, And then that might even out towards the end of the decade. We might see the burst start to increase again in the city. Okay, and these are looking at our projections. Dr. Noonan and Ms. Michael came to the school board to talk about when we look at projections to try to figure out budgeting, and the board did feel that we should go to use our short-term projections, which are the most conservative of the three. We thought that would be the best, given just sort of what's been happening over the past couple years. So we are going more conservative on our projections. And this is to note, this does not include Jesse Thackeray. So the numbers might, if you see the numbers are a little off, that's why that is. Okay, and just to, again, to reemphasize that we are very grateful for the collaborative partnership we have with you all. For the past 3 years, our budget has fallen within budget guidance. And we know that, the partnership between the school board, the city council, the administrative side of the school system, and our general government is really vital to the city's success. Now, for those who are watching, you may not know that the school board and the city council met in December to go over city council guidance. And at that time, we understood that there would be an increased assessed value of real estate, in which, of course, we know from over the past week that has indeed come true. So what we talked about was really that we wanted to see a tax rate reduction between 0 and 4 cents to give some relief to homeowners, and that would also take into account the elimination of the groceries tax. Also, that at that meeting, we all decided as a school board and a city council that recruitment and retention of our employees was very valuable and that we needed to stay competitive. Okay, and then also during the December 6th meeting, we talked about organic growth revenue, and that was forecasted to be 8.4%. And if the governor was to eliminate the grocery tax, it would be down to 6.3%. We talked about the revenue sharing methodology, and that any revenue coming in above guidance would be shared 50-50. And again, the funding requested by our school system of 6.3 does fall within that organic growth revenue guidance range. And we'll go through this real quickly. State revenue will account for 15.4% of the school board budget. State aids coming in at $527,000. Sales tax $422,000. I have it on there. Am I off here? Yep. Okay. Other revenue, federal revenue comes in at $19,000. We're still having a beginning balance of $450,000. Our other revenue, which comes from tuition from out-of-city students, fees, stop-arm camera fines, facility rentals, that sort of thing, comes in at $841,000. Thank you. Dr. Noonan just informed me that is a decrease in federal revenue. That's right. Thank you, Dr. Noonan. In terms of, let's see. There we go. Our advertised budget revenue, again, we thank the local community. 81.1% of our budget comes from the localities. When we combine that with the aid received from the state, that's 96.5% of our budget. And we'll talk about compensation a little bit here. Sorry, I'm not a very good kicker. Okay, there we go. See, I'm not very skilled at this pointer thing. Okay, so in terms of employee compensation, well, we're going to look at expenditures overall. So employee compensation, we're looking at $2.7 million. And again, as we all know, just as the city council and the general government, your employees are important, our employees are important. They're really our highest priority. Working conditions, positive employee working conditions really deliver a positive student learning environment. And just looking again at after COVID, increasing our focus on social and emotional well-being and academic supports. In terms of employee compensation, we are going to give our employees, we're one step. And for those employees who worked for us in fiscal year 2021, they did miss a step that year. So we are going to do a recovery step. And those two steps combined are going to be equivalent to $1.6 million. We're also going to be giving a 2.25 cost of living increase, which will total $890,677. So that is really one of the things that you all know. We already had a teacher shortage before COVID. Teachers across the country are leaving in droves, so this is something that we really need to make a priority. And as we are learning that Arlington County, which is one of the school systems we compete most with for teachers, they're doing a salary study right now, and they are looking at doing 4 missteps. And so we really anticipate that their salaries will really skyrocket. So we need to really keep do the best we can to remain competitive. That's an average of 11%, Dr. Noonan informs me. And that's right, that's in Arlington. Okay, employee compensation. A couple other highlights with employee compensation. We are increasing the National Board Certified Teacher stipend from $1,000 to $3,000, and that's really an effort to recruit and retain our nationally board certified teachers. Our health insurance rates have increased, so we'll be contributing 7% more of that. Virginia retirement system remains unchanged. Okay, I'm just going to highlight, I know you all have seen this list, so I'm not going to go through every one, but I'll just highlight a couple for you. The first one, the CTE, that's our Career and Technical Education Teacher and High School Program Coordinator. This is something that we had several teachers from Mary Ellen Henderson and Meridian come together, and they're creating a sustainability academy. And so this lines up very well with us, our ultimate goal of continuing with our IB program, which would include a career and technical piece to it. And so these teachers have been really working around the clock on the side to try to create this sustainability academy and do all these things. And it's grown, and the school board is very supportive because the school board feels career and technical education is something we can really we could do better on. And so this is going to be something that will be supporting those teachers and helping really our sustainability academy get off the ground. You'll see towards the bottom of this slide, you'll see about math instructional support. One of the things we found was after COVID, there were dips in scores from online learning, but they were more significant in math. And so what these would be, we have part-time math instructional support positions, but we will be increasing those to full-time so that there's more math support for our students as they continue to catch up after distance learning. One of the things that when Dr. Noonan and his staff create the budget, they go and they'll talk to the staff. And one of the things that the staff really talked about was the need to have more support for substitute teachers. That's been really, Dr. Noonan was just at Oak Street Elementary last week subbing. So we are really hurting for substitutes. And so one of the things that the teachers told us would help them is to have permanent substitutes at each school. So this will give us, each school will have one permanent substitute, which will float around, and we think that will give them a lot more support. And another piece of this working conditions is playground supervision. These are all things that we hope will support our teachers in the work environment, and so providing more support at recess so that teachers have a little bit of a break and some planning time during the day. Okay, and then wrapping this portion up, 2 new positions we were going to bring on, and this is really in direct response to COVID again, is a school nurse and also school psychologist. So these are things that we see we need, and social, emotional, mental health well-being is something that we're continuing to work on and help support our students. And then just having that nurse for everything, that's percolating with COVID. So those are 2 things I think will really help our students and our staff. All right, and just some other quick school investments. We're going to have a preschool registrar, some technology, equipment, and services, tuition for the students that attend Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology, covering that tuition. Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit about reductions. We have a salary lapse of $400,000, and that's when people leave their positions and they're more experienced. And so when we hire younger and newer teachers who have less experience, we are able to pay them less. So we've had some salary savings there. We have less people receiving the transitional retirement program, so we saved some money there, and so you'll see some other areas where we've saved some money. one-time funding and year-end balance. This is really interesting. One of the things that was, that I think is still in the budget was the construction. Do we know? I'm looking at, fingers crossed. There is something in the budget that is going to include one-time funding for school construction grants. And this is important to us because Oak Street Elementary is the only school that does not have ADA entrance to it. It's just stairs. And the other piece, it's also the only school that doesn't have a secure vestibule outside of the school system. So outside of the school building. So every other school you walk into, when you check in with your driver's license and they run a background check, if you don't pass that, you're not inside the building. So you're on your way. The problem with Oak Street is the security vestibule is inside the school. So once you're already inside the school if you don't pass that background check through the system there. So that is something that is concerning to us, and so we're hoping that we'll get that 1.2 million for that, both the ADA compliant entrance and that security vestibule. So fingers crossed that comes through. And then looking at year-end balance, $600,000 going towards the HVAC replacement, Mary Ellen Henderson. And then also we are exploring collective bargaining with our teachers. I'm sure you all are aware that the previous General Assembly cleared the way for collective bargaining, and we are speaking with our teachers about that and exploring that, and we anticipate as we move through that process we'll need legal help with that, so we've put some money aside for that. And then this is the chart that you've all seen, which basically summarizes what we've talked about this evening. And again, 86% of our budget is going towards salaries and benefits. And so our advertised budget is a 6.8% increase. And again, that's 6.3% coming from localities and then 0.5 coming from state aid for a total of a 6.8 increase. And just thanking you all again for your support of the high school project. We are returning $100,000 to the general government. And we understand that the lower bond financing costs, lower than projected, was a direct savings to our taxpayers. So in closing, I'd just like to say that, by Virginia Code, Dr. Noonan develops a need-based budget. This is what he just to give you a quick summary of how that works. He talks to the teachers and the principals and from each school what their needs are per school, and they try to whittle it down, and then he will bring it to the school board, and when there are requests made, they have to either be IB for all, caring culture, or equity. So those are our three main pillars, and so all budget requests need to fall in line with those three main pillars, and we feel confident that these are really the needs that we have right now to both recover from COVID, make sure that our employees are compensated, and support our staff. So thank you very much, and we're open for questions.
All right, well, thank you very much. Why don't we go on to the city budget, then we'll ask questions as they may arise.
Thank you.
Mr. Shields?
Well, good evening, members of council, and it's great to follow our colleagues from the school board, and this does mark, I think, the fourth year in a row where we've had good planning at the beginning of the budget cycle and revenue sharing information, and we've tried to follow the spirit of cooperative and well-informed revenue sharing understandings with the school board and the general government. And I think that's helped us both develop budgets that are more planful, more predictable, and hopefully more good, produces better results for both the city council and the school board. Before I go through the numbers in the budget, I would like to just make a few introductory remarks. And I think we got a little bit of a taste of that just tonight with some of the comments that the chair of the EDA made about staff. And about the dedication of staff, also seeing our library director here and having the word spoken by the library board member about our library staff. We're going to talk about numbers tonight, but fundamentally what this organization is about people. It's about employees and community working together to accomplish a lot of
really difficult, but also transformative things. So before I start in the budget, I do want to start with some people, and I want to give some thanks to key staff who make this budget possible. Kieran Bawa, our finance director, is the sort of the captain of the ship. I get to present the budget, but Kieran does most of the really clear-headed thinking that pulls everything together. And her deputy, Melissa Ryman, as you go through this process and you ask questions about the budget, you can guarantee that it's going to be Melissa Ryman who's going to be providing us the answers to those questions. She has complete mastery of the city's finances. Cindy Mester with her development of the CIP. And this year we've got a nice new thing. We have a movie about the capital improvements program. And so I want to thank Michael Timpain with the cable television station for producing that for us. And we'll share the link for that. And next week we'll be doing a deep dive on the CIP, but I think that movie helps explain it to the public.
That was featured last night, wasn't it, on the
Yes,
Oscars?
it was. Yes, in the
what I thought,
Oscars,
yeah.
exactly. So this is actually looking forward to next year's nominations. So let me mention two kind of big things that are going on, I think, that you'll see in this budget. There is a tension in our organization, and it's a tension between the ultimate accountability to do the basics of government competently in a manner that's affordable and that meets expectations of the community. These are the fundamentals of governmental service, about public safety, about making sure the trash gets picked up, all of the basic things, the streets get paved. So we have the need to do the basics competently and well. And at the same time, we have the opportunity right now to do a lot of transformative things, very difficult things. We're building a city in the former school site. We've got really significant economic development happening. We have grants across the board that are going to help us with environmental sustainability, help us with stormwater. All of these are changes that staff have to be very sophisticated in working through in order to accomplish those big transformative things competently and well at the same time. So that tension between the basics and transformation has been sort of the dynamic throughout this entire budget development process. A second point I'd make before getting into the details of it is that this has been the most dynamic budget environment that I can ever recall. From emerging from a pandemic, you'll just recall just months ago we were having the worst hospitalization numbers and case numbers that we had through the entire 2-year pandemic just about 2 months ago. We've got a war overseas. We've got major issues going before the General Assembly relating to fundamental issues about how we are, about our revenue streams. We also have incredible opportunities. Well, actually, on the negative side, let me just finish one more. We have cost inflation. And for the first time in a generation, we're dealing with cost escalation of the likes that we're just not familiar with. It's very difficult to budget in that environment. On the positive side, going back to the General Assembly, the City Council has gone to the General Assembly to ask for help on stormwater. We have a bill pending that might provide some additional relief on stormwater for the City of Falls Church. So that's something that's uncertain, but on the positive side. And then, again, the grants. And we'll come back to this and we'll go through this in detail next week about the grants that we have been able to bring to the City Council and staff working together, which is going to allow us to do so many good things for the taxpayers of the city. Next slide. Actually, how do I drive? I can advance this. Okay. Let's see if I know how to work. There we go. Okay. So some of the key investments that this budget makes. We just heard the budget presentation, and so I want to thank our colleagues from the schools for that. Again, the core government services, focusing on the basics. I want to spend more time than I usually do in the budget presentation on what we need to do that, and a big part of that is investment in our workforce. Public safety
including police, but also fire and building safety. Those are key features of this year's budget and areas of change. Walkability and traffic calming, continuing the City Council's focus on that, and that's where these big grants come really to bear and important investments in this area. And then flood mitigation, continuing, implementing the recommendations of the Stormwater Task Force, and bringing in new ARPA and grant dollars to accomplish what we had been planning, which is going to be a doubling of the rates, which is not necessary because of those grants. So we'll talk about that in the context of revenues. So I'm going to cover revenues in the back half of this presentation. But I am proposing the budget that is before you would reduce the real estate tax rate by 8.5 cents. Now that's in a context of rapidly increasing assessed values, so we'll go through that in detail. So I mentioned at the outset, this is a very dynamic environment. Week by week, big things have been happening that have changed our outlook. And so in sort of humility of that fact, working with the CFO, the budget that you have also has $1,020,000 of contingency to work through the budget development process before you adopt in May, but also potentially just to keep set aside throughout the fiscal year to deal with contingencies as they come up. So this is kind of the overview of the operating budget. And again, the capital improvements program we're going to focus on next week. So this tonight's focus is largely on the operating budget, but I do mix in a lot of the capital projects in later slides just to tell the story of what we're accomplishing in the coming fiscal year. Overall, the school transfer is growing by 6.3% to a FY 2023 locally supported budget of $46.6 million. The general government, general basic operations is growing by 6%. The contingency that I mentioned just a moment ago of $1,020,000 is the next line. That's not built into the, that's in the tax rate, but it is not built into that operating budget in the line above. We're sustaining the $100,000 that the City Council has been putting to affordable housing, so no change to that in this proposed budget. We have pay-as-you-go funding, which is built into the tax rate for investments in fleet, equipment, and property maintenance of $550,000. One area that I do want to spend time on tonight, this is kind of getting back to the basics of doing development and building construction safely and effectively in the city. We have a surge of economic development coming through our processes, so we're using those permit fees to meet that surge. The pension ROI, the council always calls for that to be called out in the budget, so that's the ongoing benefit of the contribution to the pension fund from the sale of the water system proceeds that was done several years ago. It's the equivalent of about $0.0125 on the tax rate of returning benefit for the taxpayers. Debt service is going down slightly, about $1.2 million in the coming year, and that's because of a refinance of some debt that the council authorized and other debt coming off of our books. Capital reserves, we're having a slightly lower reliance on capital reserves, but you'll recall part of the financing plan for the high school is to draw down on capital reserves to cover debt service using the ground lease proceeds from the West Falls project. So that continues in this budget. And then lastly on this list, built into the operating budget is $1.38 or $1.4 million of operating dollars that are coming from the American Rescue Plan. So the bottom line is a budget that is growing 7.6% overall once all those things are wrapped in. So I'm going to focus on things that we're investing in the coming year first, and so let's talk about kind of the big picture. Where do the dollars go? So we've heard from the school board on the school budget, and that is the largest part of the city's local budget, with 42%. Debt service is right now 12% of the operating budget, and that's right now kind of just gotten back within the parameters of our old traditional limit on debt service. We did exceed it for 2 years in the initial financing of the high school. Then sort of going around in terms of the different shares of the budget: administration, sheriff, and court services. Public safety is police and fire. That's 15% of our budget. That's the second largest component. Public works is 6%. Recreation, parks, and library is 5% of the budget. Health and human services, 4%. Building permits and inspections and planning, that is 4% of the budget. And then that contingency that I mentioned just a moment ago, along with other transfers, is 3%. So I want to talk about investment in employees. So we've talked a lot about that over the course of the past year. And this has been a year in which we've really experienced a lot of the things that are happening across the country in terms of dynamism in the workforce, people being very willing to move to different jobs. And we've experienced that in the City of Falls Church. And we know we need to invest in our workforce to keep talented people here. In the past year, we dipped as low as 15% vacancy across the board in terms of vacant positions. And most acutely, we experienced that in the police department, where we had 25% vacancy in September. We've since hired back all those positions, so we're now fully staffed again in the police department. Dpw Operations, we have 21 positions in operations. These are the people that fix our streets, keep our sanitary sewer system operating properly, pick up the leaves, do all of the crucial work, take care of our buildings. That was down to 8 people, basically 1/3 of the staffing level. That was kind of where our most acute problems were in terms of vacancies. So investment, the City Council did support management in trying to address these issues last December. And we did a 3% mid-year adjustment, but we also made targeted improvements to pay in DPW operations and in police. This budget continues that with an across-the-board merit increase of 4% for city employees. So 3% from December plus 4% with this budget. From a budgeting perspective is a 7% increase in compensation, and that's what employees will experience in their paychecks with some additional pay for police and DPW operations. We set aside $200,000 to fund the recommendations of the compensation study, which is ongoing right now. I don't know if we'll have data ready by May adoption time. We're working very hard with our consultants so that we will. But in any event, we've set aside $200,000 to address their recommendations. Professional development is an ongoing need and for any organization. With the pandemic, we cut that budget. This year, we're restoring $35,000 for professional development. Health insurance is $163K. Basically, we have the same program as schools and experience those same 5.3% or 8.2% for Kaiser increases to those premiums. That's a cost share between employees and the employer, the city. Not just compensation, but what really is important for staff is having the tools they need to be able to do their job effectively. So we make key investments in this area, new equipment for DPW, some fleet updates. Also in our garage with 2 safety issues, replacing bay doors and the lift, which is used to take care of school buses, but all of our trucks in the garage, $250,000. Those are largely funded pay-as-you-go or with capital reserves. Investments in technology includes 2 new positions. And one, this is sort of getting back to this, focusing on the basics. This past year, we had an upgrade to Munis. It was probably the most disastrous software upgrade that we could have imagined. And it's something that, an experience that we shared with the school staff because we share the same ERP or financial system. So we're proposing a new position that would serve as the technical advisor for all staff citywide in interfacing with Munis. So this is the treasurer, the commissioner of revenue, finance department, permits function. Those are the sort of the super users. One of the big weaknesses that we've had in trying to unravel these problems with Munis over the past year is not having dedicated technical support in-house to deal with those issues. So we try to address that. The library is a very high-touch technology zone with most of the patrons coming in, interfacing with technology in the library. They have felt, I think, for years a bit underserved by ITS because ITS has so many responsibilities. So we want to have a dedicated technology librarian to support all the public-facing technology in the library as well as the backbone technology for the library. Lastly, I'll just say in the area of cybersecurity, one thing that I think is a big efficiency is in the past year we've made a $30,000 investment to have outsourced security monitoring for the city's network. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail, but I think that's a for a very reasonable cost, which we jointly procured with surrounding smaller jurisdictions, including the towns and the small cities of Northern Virginia. I think we've come up with a very cost-effective way with a pretty big step forward in terms of our cybersecurity. Okay, so shifting to public safety, sort of the bottom line is that this budget restores 2 police officer positions. Now, over the course of the past year and a half, we've converted 2 uniform positions to civilian positions for good reasons. One, we took an officer out of the police department to be our director of emergency operations. And secondly, we've replaced one of the uniformed command staff with a civilian command staff that will implement and hold us accountable or keep us moving forward on implementing the use of force committee recommendations, but also to advance our work on accreditation and all the proofs of compliance of our changing policies, making sure we have the proofs of compliance throughout our department, which is the backbone of accreditation. So those are the changes we made in the past year to meet those needs. Now we'd backfill that with 2 police officer positions funded in this budget, and the target for those would be to get an officer back in the schools with a school resource officer and have dedicated traffic patrol. That'll get us back to the 34 uniformed positions that we had prior to making those 2 shifts to civilian positions. In the area of building safety, this is probably one of the most dramatic aspects of change within the operating budget. So we would deploy the very significant revenues that are coming in from building permits. So Broad and Washington and the West Falls project, between the 2 of them, are generating several $1 million in new fees. So we would take 1.1 million of those to staff up so we can handle that surge. Last year, the council approved 3 new positions. Actually, probably the last 2 years, we've brought in 3 new positions to manage our permit activity. We stepped that up with 6 new positions. And so 4 of those are on the core function of plan review and inspections and permit intake, and then 2 of them are to help support the whole team. One of those is a planner that will do compliance of voluntary concessions and site plan compliance out there on the street for these major projects. And the other is IT support. Our permits function is technology heavy. They're super users of our technology, and we give them dedicated support. So if these are funded, the permit reserve will be able to cover these for the coming 3 years with projects that are already financed and advancing. It is not dependent on projects that are just in the entitlement phase right now. Okay, so shifting now to just kind of areas where we are out in the community making transformative effects with projects. And so let me just cite a couple of examples of those. Right here on Park Avenue between the library and the State Theater, undergrounding all the utilities and putting in streetscape and all the amenities of a safe, walkable street. That's the Park Avenue project. That's under design. The Shreve Road Safe Routes to School for a safe route from the WNOD all the way through the intersection up to Haycock Road. So that's a good, viable, and safe route for students to get to school. Another grant-funded project. South Oak Street Bridge, replacing that bridge. That's going to have major impacts on school operations, so we need to coordinate that because we'll have to close Oak Street. But Councilmember Snyder might recall when we were dedicating the bridge on the WNOD that VDOT was there, and they said, hey, we do project management if you all want to take advantage of our services. And so we followed up on that. We have VDOT that's going to be our project manager for the Oak Street project, which puts some relief on our project management for other projects. We heard comments over the past several months, but again tonight about traffic calming on Lincoln. So we have a combined stormwater improvement project and traffic calming project that will cover Lincoln Avenue. That's under design in this year's budget. We actually have additional funding for that coming from a grant gotten by Don Byer through our community priority project, as well as some other grant dollars that will augment that $2.5 million. And then lastly, we're using ARPA dollars for sidewalks across the city and bus shelters. Sidewalks in particular, I think, are a key part of our traffic calming program. And so that $1.4 million in federal dollars really will be on top of the $100,000 which is built into the tax rate for our ongoing sustained neighborhood traffic calming program. So here's some still on the same theme of major transportation projects that are under which we will go out to bid on in coming months. The North Washington Street and Columbia Street intersection improvements, the Hawk signals to cross Broad Street, the W&OD crossings, the Annandale and South Maple intersection. That's the roundabout project that the council was briefed on about a month ago. And then, of course, projects that are under construction right now. This is the South Maple and South Washington Street intersection. That continues the streetscape and all the walkability improvements we've made throughout that corridor down to the South Maple intersection. The West Falls Intermodal Project, that's the $15 million. That money is being spent right now by the Falls Church Gateway Partners, and the utility wires are coming underground right now as we speak. And then the South Washington Street, that's finally wrapping up. The informative panels will be going up soon. The stormwater infrastructure was just put in the last month, and we're really looking forward to that long-lasting project coming to a close. And so those are some of the kind of the big projects on the transportation front that we'll talk about in more detail with the CIP next Monday. In the area of equity and inclusiveness, tax relief for seniors, veterans, and disabled. This is right now, if we make no changes to policy, it's $535,000 to cover the policies that we have right now. So we talked about that council contingency in the first slide of this presentation. We'll talk with the treasurer about possible changes to that policy with council, and the council contingency could be a way to fund that if that's the decision to go in that direction. We're sustaining $100K for affordable housing. That's really to match the very significant grants through the Amazon Reach Virginia program that we're administering right now. The Community Services Fund, we've traditionally funded that at $80,000 a year. We'll use ARPA dollars to augment that up to $150,000 a year to meet new needs that are coming through the CSF. Continuing ARPA funding for household assistance, funding for the Regional Capital Area Food Bank with using ARPA dollars, and then using CDBG dollars to help rehab some of the Virginia Village quadplexes that the EDA has title to and which we are responsible for currently. A couple of investments in small town character. We mentioned this just with the EDA chair, but the flower baskets and the banners and those tree lighting and those types of things are paid for through that hotel tax, and that's continued in this year's budget. Park improvements. And then we do have kind of the most sacred thing that we do as a local government is administer local elections. The Board of Elections has asked for a conversion of a part-time deputy into a full-time deputy, and this budget does respond to that Board of Elections request. Okay, so now we'll shift to revenues. What was intended in the prior slides is just to provide some highlights of the budget, and this is a 320-page document, and so we'll be over the coming weeks going through many more details, but I just wanted to hit some of the key areas. So on the revenue side, how do we pay for these things? And this is just the operating budget. Real estate taxes comprise 56% of the budget. And then going kind of clockwise around the horn, the next 40% of the budget really comes from the commercial sector. So those are meals taxes, sales taxes, the commercial sector of real estate taxes. And then the final 20% are charges for service, like rec and parks fees, building permit fees, and then lastly, that use of fund balance which we mentioned in the first slide, which is used to cover a portion of our debt service until the peak of debt service, we've gotten past that. Some of the trends on local revenues, with the reduction in the real estate tax rate that we mentioned on the first slide, real estate assessments are going up significantly, but the dollar amount change would be 4%. So we'll talk about that in more detail in just a moment. Personal property is also an area where there's a lot of increase in assessed value that's happened very suddenly, and so we're projecting 6.6 on that, but we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail momentarily. Sales taxes never did decline in the city of Falls Church through the pandemic, and that's largely because the grocery stores have been such an important part of our retail sales environment, as well as internet sales. Meals taxes in this budget are still below the pre-pandemic level, but they are, it's a 42% increase. That's just an indication of how much we cut it in the budget going into the pandemic. Business licenses, the only thing to note on that is that a big chunk of that growth is coming from the construction activity in the city. When developers are building buildings, all their contractors are getting business licenses in the city. So local taxes are strong in this budget, and that's given us some of the flexibility to do the things that we need to do in our operating budgets. Okay, so assessed values, we put out the press release just about 2 weeks ago, and assessments now are showing up in people's mailboxes. You can also go online right now and see your assessment. But on the residential sector, overall is 13.7% growth. And on the commercial side, overall, 5.7%. That includes apartments. So if you take apartments out, the commercial alone is growing 2.6%. New construction is $34.6 million, and that's a combination of Founders Row, principally, and the tear downs and rebuilds that you see out in the neighborhoods. For the first time in the city's history, we've crossed the $5 billion mark in terms of total assessed value in the city. So a penny on the tax rate, just in shorthand, generates $510,000. Regionally, our AV growth is kind of in the middle of what you are seeing in the region, with some of the largest increases out in Loudoun County and in Prince William County, all at double digits. Closer in, Fairfax County is kind of more similar to what our growth rates are. And then inside the Beltway is where you have some of the slower growth in assessed values just in this market cycle. And so just wanted to share that regional information. So on the real estate tax rate, what is proposed in this budget is a tax rate of $1.23.5, which is a reduction of 8.5 cents. So if it were not for any change to the tax rate, the average homeowner in the city would be experiencing about a $1,400 increase in their tax bill. So the 8.5 cent reduction is about $730 reduction to that impact. But there still is, and I think this is really something we have to kind of work through with the community, still is a significant increase in the tax bill, about 6%. So we share that information. We also share it in the context of what the trends have been. And so, generally speaking, over the past several years, we've been reducing the rate. Last year, we had managed to keep the impact on tax bills at just about 100%. $100 for the average taxpayer increase was the impact last year. This year it would be larger than that based on the budget that's before you. In terms of what's happening regionally on tax rates, you can see that just about everybody is either holding them flat or reducing them to some extent due to the increases in assessed value. And so the city of Falls Church at the 8.5 cents is kind of more similar to the Loudoun County or those western counties that I described that have the sharpest increases in assessed value. So on the commercial and an industrial tax, I mentioned that commercial is going up 2.6%. If we cut the tax rate by 8.5 cents, then the average commercial tax bill would go down by about 6%. What I am proposing in this budget is a Cni tax. That's a commercial and industrial overlay tax of 5 cents. that could be, that would generate $400,000, and it can be used exclusively for transportation. So things that we have needs for in the area of transportation, obviously we have a huge transportation program in our capital improvements program, but this would allow us to meet capital needs from WMATA, help us cover our bike share costs as those grants expire. We can cover sidewalks and other and expansions of the transportation system. So if this is enacted, if this proposal is enacted by the City Council, it would be a net 3.5 cent reduction for commercial taxpayers, or a 1% decrease in the average commercial property tax bill. Car tax, that's just one other thing that I think we need to have a conversation about as we go through the budget. The extraordinary Blue Book valuation increases, the Commissioner of Revenue has brought that to our attention. It's something that everybody in the region is experiencing. You know, some vehicles are going up by 40 to 50% because of the demand and for those vehicles, and the microchip problems and supply problems for new vehicles. That's a temporary phenomenon. We don't think that's going to last. That's going to work its way through the system. So we're not recommending a change to the rate, but rather we'll review options that the region is doing. And so essentially, like what they're doing in Loudoun County, is they're taking that for cars, they're just saying multiply it by 0.85 or 0.9, and then just that'll be the valuation, or that'll be the tax calculation for this year, and then we'll assess again next year. So I think there's some pretty simple solutions out there that we can discuss as we go through the budget process. On the stormwater fund, so I'm going to start at the bottom of the slide. The key thing is we're moving forward with the major CIP projects. We're going through design right now. We intend to execute in the coming months, starting really with the Lincoln project, which is part of the watershed for the Trammell branch, and that project will be one of our lead-off projects. The main thing is 2 years ago we were talking about doubling the stormwater fee. Because we're using grant fees, we won't need to do that. We are experiencing inflation, however, just in the basic maintenance of the stormwater system. So we're asking or proposing a 3% increase in the fee. That would be about a $7 impact on your average homeowner's stormwater fee bill. On the sanitary sewer fund, we do have kind of one of the big policy issues we're going to bring to council just in a few weeks or months, is the purchase of additional capacity from Fairfax County to handle growth. The way that we pay for that purchase is through developer fees, through the availability fees that developers pay. So that's kind of one of the big things that's in the CIP. We have not raised sanitary sewer rates, which covers just our basic operation, not that expansion, just the basic operation. We haven't touched those rates since 2016. We are now, feeling the pinch of cost increases, and so we're asking for a 3% increase to sanitary sewer fund rates as well. I've got just a slide or two on ARPA just to summarize. The council's been working through policy on ARPA really since this time last year. This budget would continue with the plans that were discussed last fall. And so between the CIP and the operating budget, there's $3.7 million of ARPA dollars in this FY23 budget. That's 21% of the total allocation. We do need to encumber the funds by 2024 and expend them by 2026. So we look forward to that discussion. Some of the things that are in the operating budget include this list here, and it's for general government and for schools to sustain those things that we were funding in the current year's budget. And then on the CIP side, kind of the big thing we're doing on the CIP side is funding new sidewalks across the city with $1.4 million. And then at the community center, $1 million to replace the now 25-year-old HVAC system at the community center, doing a strategy very similar to what the schools have done with using ARPA dollars for HVAC replacements at school facilities. So to summarize, look forward to working with the City Council and the community over what, again, is a budget that does have these tensions of making sure we're taking care of the basics even as we are working through big transformative projects. And I look forward to working through tactically how we attempt to accomplish that with this year's budget. In terms of the process, some of the key things will be key information that people will have. We can go to these website links to get information. And again, we do have some videos from every department director. So this is a kind of a key thing for the community and for City Council. Rather than having every department director come before City Council for a budget presentation, we do those virtually. We have the videos posted. And then we can use our time together on strategic deliberations and question and answer. The next steps, we've got a budget town hall that will be on Thursday. It'll be a virtual town hall meeting on Thursday, March 31st in the middle of the day at noon. On the 4th, as I mentioned, we'll talk about the CIP, but also Council will be talking about these tax rate ordinances. So we want to bring those to you for your review at work session on April 4th, and then set the stage for first reading and advertising the tax rates at your meeting on April 11th. We have our second budget town hall on April 21st, and that'll be in the evening. That also will be a virtual meeting to facilitate everyone's participation in that. We're targeting May 2nd as a final adoption. We have pushed into May for the first time in I think our memory anyway, and early May is preferred because I know the schools have a lot of obligations they need to make in terms of teacher contracts and the like, which is why we're trying to push it for early May. So that ends the presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions and look forward to Council engaging with you on this over the coming weeks.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Shields. There's a lot of information there, and I know there's going to be a lot of questions, both from people on council and the public as a whole. I would just remind everyone that this is the start of the process, not the end. And so we may not get all our answers tonight, but I think the main thing is just put the issues and questions out on the table, and then with all the follow-up you just saw on the schedule. So why don't we go ahead and open it up to questions from council? Does anyone want to start? Ms. Conley?
Thank you, Mr. Shields, Dr. Noonan, and Ms. Downs for the presentation on the budget. This has come a long way since the joint meeting that we had in December, and as the pieces fall into place, it's really nice to see how we'll be able to deploy them for the benefit of our citizens. So I just want to urge everyone to take their time and not make any grand proclamations about what's going to happen, because there's a lot to learn still. And I'm looking at all my homework for the next couple weeks, and there definitely is a lot for all of us to review and learn, and I'm sure we'll have a lot more questions. But I thank you for those presentations and for your thorough description of things. I have one question for Ms. Downs, and that is, there's this extra chart for Dr. Noonan. This chart that was with the school board presentation, that can you just give a quick description of that, so that as we prepare our questions and answers, we know what that is?
Sure. A quick description of this, and I'd like to thank Kristen Michael, our Chief Operating Officer, and Michelle Kopeck, our Budget Director, for helping pull this together. It was mentioned in the presentation that Ms. Downs gave that we are looking at regional salary competition, and one of the school divisions that we look very closely to within that context is Arlington. So what you'll see on this is the Falls Church City Public Schools proposed salary scales on the front, along with Arlington's salary scales, and this is just the teacher scale. And then if you flip it over to the back, you'll see in red those areas where we will be falling short based on our proposed budget. So what was mentioned earlier was that in some cases in Arlington County, where they are doing a compensation study, they may be recovering as many as 4 steps for their employees for past misses, and we're proposing a 2-step recovery, or a 1-step recovery, excuse me. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Great.
And then a question, I guess this is for Mr. Shields. Last year, we had a great, in the past, we've had a nice chart of not just what Fairfax County pays in taxes, but also different towns and areas pay different fees to compare to what our tax rate is. And I'm hoping that will appear at some point in the next couple of weeks as well.
Yes, we will prepare that and get that circulated.
Great, thank you.
Other questions, comments? Ms. Hiscott?
Just a few quick ones while Dr. Noonan's up there. Well, one of the bullet points we kind of skipped over, and having worked on the bond referendum as a volunteer in 2017, I just wanted to compliment you all on when we presented that to our community. We went door to door promoting the bond referendum. We noted to our residents that that would cost a 7-cent increase on your tax rate. And not only have we not increased by 7 cents, we've been decreasing since then. And I think that's due to a lot of the work on the from the council before me on economic development and a lot of good stewardship from the schools. So we didn't go through all of the points there, but that was one that personally I think is pretty important that all of our residents understand, that when we decided as a community to vote for that bond referendum, we were looking at it as a 7-cent tax increase, and we're not going that direction, thankfully. So I just wanted to point that out. And then looking at this salary study, this is after we make our increases and with the estimated increases from Arlington, correct?
That's correct.
I know you've just done some research to find those out, but have you had a chance to see what it would take to keep us competitive with Arlington?
I don't know that we've necessarily done that analysis, but we could seek that.
I think that would be interesting in light of doing the staffing comparisons on the city side too, to make sure that we're competitive in the region, to know that it's great that we're able to move forward with what we did, but if it's just continuing, or if we continue to be behind and our competition is primarily Arlington, it'd be interesting to see, based upon our current staff distribution among step and experience levels, what that would cost us.
Mm-hmm. You can see on the right-hand side of the table that shows Falls Church City Public Schools compensation as a percentage, that the range in there is somewhere between 0.085 all the way up to, in some cases, nearly 27% discrepancy. So without doing the math, just know that it's somewhere in that range, but it's pretty significant.
Yeah, so it'd just be interesting, if we have all master's teachers with tenure, on the 10-year step, we would still look okay. But if we had all, or the majority at 20 years and PhD, you know what I'm saying? It'd be interesting to see, based upon our current staffing levels, what would keep us competitive.
Sure.
And then I'll hold my other comments till others ask them of you, Dr. Newton.
Mr. Snyder?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Superintendent, you mentioned during your presentation and the chair of the board about 10 students from Ukraine. Is there anything that the general government or the community needs to do to further support those students and their families? And that's an ongoing request for, please keep the communication open as to what the needs are. Are there any unmet needs at this point that you're aware of, or can you keep us advised as the situation develops?
Thank you, Councilmember Snyder. We appreciate that. Of those families, the vast majority of them are State Department families that have come back. Mm-hmm. We do have some, at least 2 that I know, refugee families, or refugee students that are here. We are connecting with social services currently, but they have good connections here in Falls Church, which is really helpful, but we certainly will keep you apprised.
Okay, and also the State Department families, obviously, they have needs, and our schools have been consistently open for that. So anything, refugees, specifically Ukraine, but generally across the board, Afghanistan and elsewhere, please keep us advised as needs develop that you see. So
absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thanks. A couple questions for the city manager. Just one area of interest that I'd like to see developed are the reserve funds, the use of those funds, the fact that we remain probably carrying the highest debt load we've ever carried in the history of the city. And so maintaining adequate reserve funds is something critically important in that circumstance. So any comments tonight, but in the future, I'll be interested in seeing that fleshed out a bit.
And if I could just mention, so with the CIP next Monday, we will talk about all of our funds. The Budget and Finance Committee did a review of all the city funds just to kind of have that roadmap. But the key one is the Capital Reserve Fund and how we're financing these big capital projects, and so we'll spend a lot of time on that.
Okay, thanks. And then finally, I think slides 9 and 10, where we talked about mobility, I want to recognize the work of city staff and Cindy especially. There are big dollars involved in transportation, and I think that underscores the council's commitment and the city staff's commitment to active participation in the regional bodies there. I think you're talking about literally tens of millions of dollars of grant money that we're using for those purposes. So thanks very much for these, just some initial questions and comments.
Ms. Hardy?
Thank you. Thank you all for the presentations. There's a lot to digest here. I'm going to start on the school budget. A couple high-level thoughts. Appreciate everyone coming in at guidance, and again, the continued strong partnership. The new high school is beautiful. Another place that we've had great collaboration over the years, especially earlier on in my council career, is capital planning. And so with these latest enrollment projections, where we have declining enrollment and actually staying below 2,500 students, I think for the next 10 plus years, while we may have kind of ongoing CIP needs, do we have school capacity CIP needs? And so I guess a different way to phrase it is, how long is our current school capacity going to last us?
Yeah, that's a great question, Councilmember Hardy. And just to clarify, it's interesting to see kind of where our current enrollment numbers are. So the slide that was shared by Chair Downs was our September data. We actually are continuing to grow. We're bringing new families in, and we're beyond where we were in September, and we're currently beyond where we were last year. And so one of the things that and I'm going to get to your question, I promise, but one of the things that we're really interested in partnering with the city on potentially is the idea of hiring on a contract a demographer to help us really get a better understanding of what our overall enrollment is going to look like as some of these other places come online, whether it's Founders Row 1, Founders Row 2, Broad and Washington, and certainly up near the high school. So that being said, without knowing exactly what the growth is going to look like, but anticipating that we are going to have some growth, even though the Weldon Cooper numbers maybe show that it's fairly steady, for now, we are in really good shape from a capital perspective. I'll be working with our COO, Kristen Michael, over the next year or so to look at a capacity study just to make sure that we're where we need to be. But we did take great pains when we built the high school to include some extra square footage that could ultimately be peeled off for a variety of different purposes. So, for example, on floors 4 and 5, we have space available to create 6 new classrooms. The capacity at the high school is more than the student population that we have right now. So from a secondary perspective, we're in pretty good shape. I think the risk that we will face down the line really will be at our 2 elementary schools at Mount Daniel and at Oak Street. But if our numbers do stay fairly steady, we should be okay. But again, I think having someone come on and work with the schools and potentially with the city general government and thinking about it from a more refined perspective through a demographer, we may get a better handle on that.
Great. I certainly would support that. I think in-house we actually have pretty good data on how our mixed use is performing, and actually down to a pretty precise level can project the number of students, and I think we've come in pretty accurately. But if we think that a demographer would help us, especially in the single-family existing neighborhoods, that would help. But I think ultimately I'd like to get to how much room do we have in each school so that we can do that CIP planning in the out years. I don't think anybody wants to inherit all the capital needs that we've had to deal with the past 6 years. So, second question I have is really around salary competitiveness. So that's obviously a shared priority across general government and the schools. And I know that Debbie's already asked this as well, but I think it's the Wavy Guide that comes out. Mm-hmm. How are we ranked currently in that Wavy Guide?
I'll have to send that to you. That is in the budget documents that were prepared for the school board. So if you go to that school board question and answer link, the Wavy Guide is in there. I don't have it off the top of my head, but we'd be happy to reshare it.
Hopefully with the STEP and the makeup STEP and the COLA, we stay kind of in that top 1-2 spot that we've always shared with Arlington.
We have a Northern Virginia Region 4 Superintendent's Council where we share data privately before we come out with our budgets or our proposed budgets. And there are some pretty large salary increases that are being given. across Northern Virginia. So I think for us to remain competitive, we're going to have to do some work. And one of the things, and I mentioned the capacity study, we are in the pipe for also a salary study. This time, not this time next year, but hopefully in time for the budget next year to be able to take a look at that.
Great. And kind of a corollary question is, as you've heard from Wyatt, I think we've had an attrition issue and a high vacancy rate on general government. Has that been a concern in the schools as well, and how can we support you on that?
Yeah, thank you. I would say that through this pandemic, we've done extraordinarily well comparatively to our surrounding jurisdictions. We're seeing a rebound of teacher candidates for positions. There was a time where we might get 7, 8, 9 teachers for a singular position here in the city of Falls Church. We certainly aren't getting that now, but we are getting 3 or 4. And so that gives us a sense that there is a robust candidate pool out there. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I think one is certainly our facilities. The other is the size of our school division. Another is just our community spirit and the fact that our students do really well. So we are, for example, last week I hired a teacher in from Arlington. I've got another teacher that I'm interviewing tomorrow that's coming from Prince William. So even with some of these other things coming, we're getting some transition in.
That's great. I'm going to hold my questions for Wyatt just so that someone else can ask Dr. Noon while he's there.
Mr. Duncan, did you have a question? If you don't have any, that's...
I do.
Ms. Leon?
Yes, thank you very much for all of this information. The one question that I wanted to ask was, with the FTE investments of new staff in this presentation, does it impact the student-to-staff ratios? Are we changing that dynamic with the investments in headcount?
We will still staff at the same levels. However, what we'll likely see with a few of those positions in there, a reduction in some class size. But the vast majority of the people that are in this budget are folks that are specialists in reading, specialists in mathematics, that are providing support and push in structure.
Okay. Thank you.
So I've got a question for both you and Wyatt. And pardon me if I didn't see the actual information, but I know you all are doing a step increase and a cost of living increase. Do you have an idea what that total number sort of blends out to, a percentage number that blends out to? And then I'd ask Wyatt the same question. I know we had a mid-year increase and all that, but just so we can sort of get numbers on both the fronts.
Sure. Our employees, if they're eligible for a step, a cost of living adjustment, and the additional step, the recovery step, that the first step is 2.7%, the cost of living is 2.25%, and the additional step is 1.9%. And the reason that's less is because not everybody qualifies for that. So if you are eligible for that step, that COLA, and that additional step, that nets out to 6.86%, which is slightly less than what the general government is offering.
So, and if you don't get the step, the missed step, what's the number?
You're at 4.95.
Okay, and Wyatt, I know we got a little bit of apples and oranges here with mid-year and the like, but why don't you give us a take on general government increases?
Sure. So we did a 3% merit increase, and we're proposing a 4%. So it would be a 7% increase, taking the two together relative to where we started in FY22.
Okay. All right. Mr. Duncan?
Thank you. I wanted to shift gears just a little bit, but thank you for your comments, Dr. Noon, about the attributes of our school system and community that make us appealing, even against Arlington. You know, it's funny. We spend a lot of time talking about economic development here, and there's one consistent theme that you hear. It's, well, we don't want to be like Arlington. We don't want to be Ballston. We don't even want to be Courthouse, you know. And yet at budget time, we want to be exactly like Arlington. And it's true on the general government side too, you know. It's true with law enforcement, teachers, and so forth. And there's no solution to that. It's just, I'm pleased that we were able to catch up to Arlington. I think they weren't paying close attention or something. And as soon as they find out that we're paying pretty much the same as we are, then they're going to increase theirs because they're able to do that. And that's just a challenge that every council will have to face, I guess. But it's nice to hear that the efforts that we've spent on facilities and building that community spirit around our schools are paying some dividends. I wanted to ask Mr. Shields about the ARPA item that you focused on in your slide. We've done some great things. We've worked hard on economic development, good management by the schools in the city. Bravo for us. We're also lucky to have the ARPA money that we can, draw on, and there's no getting around that. And I'm just concerned for those who come later that we not commit ourselves to positions or functions that are ARPA funded that we'll need to sustain after the ARPA money has gone away. And I'm wondering if in your budget, or maybe Dr. Noonan's budget too, there's any, flags that we need to be aware of and plan for now, so that 3 or 4 years down the line, we don't end up with the ARPA deficit, basically, in local revenues.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And so first, one thing, Mayor Tarter was chair of the NVRC at a really critical time when the region was lobbying our Congress people just to make sure that those allocations were fair for small jurisdictions, and that was effective. And so the city is, along with all the cities in Virginia, I think has been helped quite a bit by ARPA. So as we go through this budget process, I think there's two kind of things we need to keep a real close eye on, is the use of this permit reserve, because that, we view that as a surge of activity. We don't think we're going to have this amount of economic development or building activity forever. And so we're using those reserves. So that's one area where those dollars could not be here 3 years from now. So that's kind of one area to pay close attention to. And then the other is the ARPA dollars and making sure that those don't get embedded permanently into our operating budgets. Now, we have made some critical decisions that we needed to make to respond to the COVID pandemic. And so we have some positions that are funded with ARPA dollars. And those are listed in that chart. But as we go through this budget process, we always just want to be mindful of what that means for the 2 years out, 3 years out. And
Dr.
That's
Newton?
true on both the school, general government side and on the school side.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that I can say it any better than City Manager Shields did, but I would just say that we're very clear that the money that we're using, particularly for recurring costs, which is a dangerous thing to do, but we are very clear with everyone that we hire that it's on a temporary temporary short-term basis. So, and that's actually written into the contracts that we're giving people. So
Good. Okay.
we should not face a cliff, if you will.
Cliff, thank you. Good phrase. Thanks. Okay, shifting gears, another question I had, I think mostly to Wyatt. The Cni assessment that you're proposing, we'll talk about this in great detail, but I just want to make sure that the business community understands what that is, how it differs from and is disconnected from the B poll tax. Are there any opportunities for B poll tax relief as we impose a Cni tax? Just your initial opening thoughts on that, I think, would be that'll be an item of interest, I think, in your budget, particular interest in your budget.
Right. So I do think, when we have our work session next week, I'd like to get council feedback on that. I do think it's it presents a fair approach on taxation, given sort of the discrepancy between what's happening in the residential sector and the commercial sector. But we can go through the details on that. But just to be clear for those who are listening, this would be on the owners of real estate. And so to the extent that those pass through to tenants, then we need to be very mindful of what that means for our small businesses. But the people who pay the real estate taxes are the landlords, or the people who own the property. And so that's where this would be focused. In this budget proposal, we do not have proposed changes to the business license tax rates.
Okay, thank you. Before I go, I I just want to thank both of you and everybody on staff who's been involved in putting this together for presenting a budget which, balances our insatiable appetite for excellence here with the realities of affordability. We talk a lot about affordability as it relates to lower income folks, but affordability is an issue for many, if not most, families in the city of Falls Church at some level. And I think the tax rate that you have proposed for our initial consideration would be the lowest since, I think, 2010, I believe. So we're talking 13 years since the tax rate has been as low as what you would propose here, which is, because of a lot of things that we've talked about already. But that's important. I must say, I must ask what the equalized tax rate would be. What's the number that the rate would be if we threw off as much? Any guesses?
So we print that number. It's part of the advertisement for the tax rate. And Ms. Bawa, have you done that calculation? I'm sorry? I can't hear you. $1.93.
This would be the rate that you wouldn't need to, that would essentially be neutral to a taxpayer.
Right. Current assessments, the new assessments carried in. Well, okay, we can obviously.
So we'll have that number. For
yeah, right. You could have just for giggles. I went into the online to see my assessment, and I used my house not because it's exceptional, because it isn't exceptional. It's very typical, 2-bedroom brick Cape Cod, built in 1948, added to here and there, but not in any major way. Bought for $102,000 in 1985, and now worth $980,000 according to the most recent. So I figured that my tax rate, in order to match my bill from last year, my adjusted or new tax rate would have to be about 109, which that's a whole lot less than I thought even a week ago. And I'm not suggesting we're going to go there, but it is useful to have that number as a bracket, I think.
Right.
Am I pretty close?
So, Ms., no, you're special. You're exceptional. But so the equalized rate across the board would be $1.193. So that would be a 12.7 cent reduction.
Okay. Yeah. No, our house 20% increase was. Oh, that reminds me of one other thing. There's, I think, going to be a lot of interest in assessments this time. We have a new assessor. We had a process that we went through. We have high confidence in him. I understand all that. But there are going to be people who are going to sort of, wow, really? Is this a typo? And I just want to make sure that our communications efforts are aimed towards making sure that when those people call City Hall with a question, somebody picks up the phone and, gets them in queue if they can't answer it right off the bat. But I think it's, as we go through the budget process, it would be helpful for the community to have confidence that the assessment was accurate, and also that if there are any questions, that the staff is able to respond to them promptly. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Snyder, Ms. Connolly, and then Ms. Hardy.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of things for the city manager. Considering the volatile environment in Richmond right now, talk of not just talk, but action and on the grocery tax and potentially other things, have you taken that into account with this budget?
So as we were going through trying to develop budget recommendations for the City Council, as I acknowledged and as you just did again, it's been such a dynamic environment. So many things have changed so quickly, week by week. And that is the reason why there's a contingency of the size of $1,020,000 in the budget to help the council deal with. I think if past trends will hold over the coming weeks, there's still going to be additional shocks that will come, new information from the General Assembly, and I think we're just going to need that flexibility as we go through the deliberation process together. So that was the intent with that contingency.
Okay, so in essence, you're building some of that volatility in right now in terms of the contingency, which if things turn out well, we can reduce the tax rate even further. Theoretically, if things turn out badly, we may need to use that. So it seems to me that that's a good approach right now. Secondly, thanks for the balancing, including the lower tax rate. I think for the reasons that Councilmember Duncan said, that's important for everyone. Finally, again, on the positive side, thank you for building back the police department. That's absolutely fundamental to why people have government and what we're paying for as taxpayers. So thanks for building that back rapidly, and to focus on traffic law enforcement as well in the budget. Those are the comments I had right now. Thank you.
Ms. Conley?
Thanks, Mayor Charter. Mr. Shields, you mentioned the charts that we did in, that Ms. Bawa and Ms. Michael did in Budget and Finance Committee related to our reserves. What page are they on in the budget book? 61? Okay. Great, thank you. So those are new charts that haven't ever been in the budget before. Right, okay, thanks.
Ms. Hardy?
Thank you. So building off what Dave Snyder said, to clarify, is the grocery tax currently in the budget?
So as we were going through the process, what is to say? So we are expecting that the General Assembly is going to make us whole on the grocery tax. That is the answer to your question. Yes.
And so that's built in, and it's not like a separate contingency thing. Unless that they take it away suddenly, then that's where we use the contingency.
That's where the contingency that is there would be used. That's right.
And based on reading the tea leaves now, do we think that this is something they'll do year after year?
Ms. Mester, what is your tea leaf reading on this?
I think for the next 2 years, it may be year by year, because I'm not seeing consensus to build it into code. But I do sense that there's a strong effort to make us whole. After April 4th, and they call the special session back, and we see some more outcomes, I'll reread the tea leaves, but. Yeah.
I mean, they can't really put it in, they can't bind future legislatures on how to spend money and the like. So hopefully they can institutionalize in some way, but short of it being in the Constitution, the Virginia Constitution, I think it's going to be pretty challenging to legally ensure that it can't be used in other purposes going forward after this 2-year cycle.
Yeah, code could always be changed, but it's harder. But the budget is exactly like you can't bind a future governing body.
I just wanted to add that while the general government's budget is built with the grocery tax, the school division's budget was built without the grocery tax. So we were under the impression that the 8.4% growth we really needed to look at it as a 6.2 to 6.8% growth. So if indeed the city as a whole, general government and schools, are held harmless, we would be interested in continuing that conversation, because we did build it without the grocery tax included.
Thank you. Wyatt, I still have more for you. You're not done yet. Mary Beth had asked for kind of a chart comparing our property tax rate with kind of add-ons compared across jurisdictions. If I could expand on that request, given that we are talking about the car tax, stormwater, sewer, can we look at that for all the taxes that a resident may pay? And then now with the CNI, being able to look at that with the same kind of filter across the jurisdictions. I think it's important to look at the total picture.
Okay.
I think Dave Charter asked this already, but I'd like to know the salary increases that we're doing, which I think you mentioned for general government schools, but compare that to our neighbors for the work session next week, if we have that available. The senior tax relief, currently the budget shows like it does not include anything in there. It's only the existing program. If we were to model expansion of the program similar to what our neighbors are doing, I'd like to know what that impact to the budget would be. I do think that in light of the rising assessments, I want to make sure relief goes to those who need it the most. Let's see. Reflecting on all the great work on transportation and mobility on slides 9 and 10, as Dave Snyder pointed out, this adds up to more millions than I can count. So grants clearly are great, but I want to make sure we also have people to do the work. I think one challenge that I continually hear is that we have the grant funding, but it's stuck in procurement, or we don't have enough project managers. And so I want to make sure that we are right-sizing staff with the actual grant dollars we have. And so I'd like kind of staff's assessment on whether that's something, again, could be paid with one-time dollars, for example, right? Like they may not need to be evergreen FTEs on staff, but if it's getting through, similar to clearing the queue that we did with NTC, if we need to clear the queue with some of these mobility projects by hiring short-term 1 to 3 year contractors, I'd be interested in supporting something like that. I think that's it for now. I have more to digest after we do our homework, so thank you.
All right, any additional questions? This is, as I said, a first bite at the budgets, and there's plenty more to come. But this has been very informative, I think, for all of us, hopefully the public as well. There are, as you heard, town halls and the like coming forward, and so there'll be plenty of opportunities for public comment and questions and the like. So, Ms. Hiscott, did you want the final word?
Oh, no, I'll let you speak again after me. You should always have the final word. I echo a lot of what's been said, and this is just the first step, and I appreciate you acknowledging the tension between trying to deliver top-notch basic services with a lot of the things that our community is really looking forward to moving forward with, like environmental issues, affordable housing, equity, supporting refugees, and providing different types of housing and different abilities for people to live within Falls Church City. I think it's really important that, like one of our public comments tonight was about making small sacrifices on our tax front in order to ensure that we can provide a community where other people can live. So, we talked about the assessments, and I understand that increase, but you've got 800, and Phil's example, $800,000 in generational wealth to pass on, in theory, to your children that you've been able to make because of living in Falls Church City, which has expanded so well and developed so well. It's not like that in other parts of the country. Many of you are from other areas originally or might own property in other areas. Your taxes are going up, but your assessed value is not increasing that same rate. So where you may not be paying taxes at a high rate each year, the net value of that property hasn't increased like it has in Northern Virginia and Falls Church City specifically. So please just, I ask people looking at their assessments, keep that in mind as part of their overall financial picture. And just rest assured that your council is trying to make sure you pay the lowest amount of taxes and we deliver the most services, and we include the highest number of people into our community that we can by investing in affordable housing, investing in mobility, investing in transportation, et cetera. So that's all I wanted to add to the conversation tonight. Thanks.
Could I say one other thing?
Yes.
Senior tax relief, it was mentioned, but I think there's unanimous interest in hearing more about that as we go. So I just wanted to put that marker in.
Including the low income into, that's what, for those who may not be familiar with what Letty was referencing earlier, it's expanding senior tax rate to affordable, and I know that our treasurer is looking at what our options are and how much that would cost on the tax rate. Thanks.
All right, so I think that will do it for this conversation. I propose we take a short break and then get back at it. So thank you all. We appreciate this so much and look forward to hearing more from you in further conversations. So we're going to stand on recess for about 5 to 10 minutes. What? All right, 10 minutes. All right, it's 10 minutes, 10:05. Watch out.
Oh, right. Actually, Celeste sent something out about that, but we were thinking it wouldn't go into effect.
I know all.
Main one that's down here is always They probably was picking up this ambient off of Celeste.
Oh, we don't have a website person. You don't need a website person to do.
All right.
1 through 10.
All right, we are back from recess. Thank you all for your patience. Let's go ahead and get back at it. We are now finally just starting the business on the agenda, believe it or not, at 10:09. Madam Clerk, would you like to call this item, first item?
Yes, there are two items that are on for public hearing regarding Founders Row 2. Would you like me to read both of those?
Yes.
All right, we have TO 21-08, ordinance to amend the official zoning district map of the City of Falls Church by rezoning approximately .98 acres of land from T1 transitional to B1 limited business located at 1001 and 1003 West Broad Street. Real property code numbers 52-102-065 and 52-102-060 on application by Mill Creek Residential Trust, LLC. And the second item is TR 21-06, resolution to grant a special exception for residential uses within a mixed-use development project and to increase the building height with a bonus of 30 feet to a maximum height of 85 feet for a mixed-use development project on approximately 2.09 acres of land located at 1001 and 1003 West Broad Street. Real property code numbers 52-102-065 and 52-102-060 on application by Mill Creek Residential Trust, LLC.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Shields, staff report.
Thank you, Mayor Tarter, members of council. So in terms of our staff report tonight, Jeff Hollern is our lead staff assigned to this project. He's joined by our planning director, Paul Stoddard. And so we would have a staff report first, just to review changes to the voluntary concessions and any other changes that staff would note. And then we have the developer that's represented, developer Mill Creek is represented by Joe Muffler, is here in the room, and he will share just a few slides of updates to the project for the City Council. I will also note at the outset that in the Council's deliberations on this project, one of the key threshold issues to the Council has been to understand the lease-up progress at Founders Row 1. So if if it suits the council, I could provide an update just on that and with particular focus on the theater first to provide both you and the community with an update in terms of where we are on that, and then turn it over to Mr. Holland for the staff report.
Sure.
Okay. So the intent, when Mill Creek came to us several weeks ago to inform us that they have a letter of intent with the theater operator for Founders Row 1, and they also indicated to us verbally that they were concerned about the economics of that lease ultimately and in terms of the overall impacts on the project. And so as we were considering Founders Row 2, the City Council directed staff to really flesh that out so there wouldn't be any surprises and so there could be full transparency in terms of what that ask might be from Mill Creek in terms of improving the economics for the theater. What has been in place, what was approved in 2016, was a economic development incentive program. So Mill Creek had two requests. One is that agreement expired in 2021 at year 5 of that agreement. And so one, they want it renewed, and then two, they asked for it to have some improved terms to reflect the changing economics of the theater industry as a whole, and in this lease in particular. As the council will recall, Mill Creek had Studio Movie Grill under lease, a signed lease, and that company went bankrupt in the midst of the COVID pandemic. So Mill Creek has started over with a new tenant, with a new theater operator for Founders Row 1. So some of the aspects that have been discussed, and this was briefed to the council at a prior meeting, I'll just review them very quickly, and then I'll talk about some of the new terms that are in a term sheet now that has been sent to the city by Mill Creek. So the aspects that we've discussed previously, the old agreement that expired last year was a 20-year economic development incentive, and so Mill Creek has asked that be extended to 30 years. The agreement is a $340,000 tax incentive program whereby the city would return essentially back to the Economic Development Authority $340,000 of theater admissions tax, and the first $20,000 would be kept by the city, the next $340,000 would be returned to the developer, and then any theater admission taxes above $360,000 would be retained by the city. So in addition to that, Mill Creek has asked that meals taxes be part of that incentive program as well. So the first $10,000 of meals taxes paid for by patrons of the theater specifically, not anywhere else in the building, but just in the theater, the first $10K would go to the city. The next $150K of meals taxes would be granted to the EDA and then granted back to the developer. And then anything above $160,000 would be retained by the city in the meals tax area. There's a 3% annual escalator to all those numbers I just mentioned. One thing that's also unchanged in the proposal is that Mill Creek will post into escrow $3.6 million that will be held and set aside in that escrow account to pay for tenant improvements for the theater. That's one of the forms of guarantees that they committed to in the amendment back in February a year ago. So some of the new things we've discussed over the past 2 weeks, we've added a performance standard by which the term of the agreement might get shortened. And so basically what that is that if the theater's gross sales exceeds $13 million, then there'd be no meals tax rebate for that year. And then if that happens 4 years in a row, then the meals tax sharing portion of this agreement would be terminated permanently, and the theater tax sharing agreement would remain but would revert back to the original 20-year term as opposed to the 30-year term. In the term sheet that we have right now, there's a series of milestones that must be reached or this agreement terminates early. And so those 3 milestones are that a lease must be executed with the theater operator by September 30th, 2022, this September 30th. Building permits for the theater must be submitted by December 31st, 2022, and the theater must be open for business by December 31st, 2023. So those are all part of the schedule that Mill Creek has for this, with a little bit of buffer. And then there is a provision in there, if those milestones aren't met, the agreement will be terminated. But there is a little bit of wiggle room there in that unless Founders Row can demonstrate continued effort to meet these milestones at the discretion of the city manager. So I would only grant that, I would only use that discretion in consultation with the city council. We would terminate if there's not really progress being made, but if we believe kind of the governance of the city believes that there is progress being made, we might extend it. But those are really to intend to, so that if this is not happening, this agreement just doesn't sort of linger around indefinitely. A couple other key things. There's a new guarantee tying the theater lease to the final 36 residential C of Os. That's essentially the top floor of the building. And so those would be withheld by the city until the theater lease is executed. So that's an additional guarantee. The city gave up a lot of those guarantees back in February when we considered Mill Creek's, the situation they were in, and we had the $3.6 million escrow. But the residential C of Os are now kind of part of the picture in terms of the guarantees for that theater lease. And then lastly, council had raised some site plan concerns. As we go through the theater, there are some changes that that Mill Creek will seek for the theater that require some site plan amendments. And as we go through that process, the developers committed that they're open to additional what they're calling modest improvements to the completed projects, such as courtyard landscaping and retail garage treatments. Mill Creek is currently planning to paint the entrance area to the garage. One of the things that we've been seeking is painting the full retail area of the garage to create a welcoming and successful parking situation for the retail users of the garage, and some additional landscaping and tree canopy coverage in the courtyard. So I'll stop my report there. I wanted to provide that information both to the public in terms of the public knows what's been asked and what's being discussed, but also answer any questions that the City Council has.
All right, thank you. Any questions, or should we continue with our presentation? Mr. Snyder?
I guess one question, Wyatt. Do we have an agreement, a signed agreement along these terms?
So we have these terms that have been submitted by Mill Creek, and those have been signed. So Mill Creek has submitted them and signed on a signed document. What the next step needs to be done for the city to agree to it then is we would turn this into agreement language, and we would do that very quickly in the next couple, next council meeting or soon, and have this be in the form of an agreement between the City Council, the EDA, and Mill Creek. So it would be the next action.
Okay, so there's no legally binding agreement at this point?
That's correct.
Any other questions? All right, let's continue with our presentation.
So if I could now call on Mr. Hollern, and I want to thank him for his work on this project as a lead staff member, and he'll provide the staff report.
Thank you, Wyatt. Thank you, Mayor Tarter and members of the City Council. I'm Jeff Holland with the planning staff. And tonight, City Council is requested to hold the advertised public hearing to consider final action on special exception and rezoning applications for the Founders Road 2 mixed-use development project. City Council last reviewed these materials during a March 7th, 2022 work session. Updates since then include updated voluntary concessions in response to staff review and council direction, as well as responses to previous questions or comments. Updated materials since the council's March 7th, 2022 work session are highlighted in gray throughout the staff report. Staff is recommending an adoption of TO 2108 and TR 2106. This recommendation is based on the project proposal's consistency with the city's adopted comprehensive plan and small area plan, which is particularly relevant to the rezoning application, as well as its general conformance with the primary and secondary criteria, which are used to evaluate special exception applications and supporting voluntary concessions, community benefits, terms and conditions. So staff has continued to review changes made to the proposed voluntary concessions as part of submission 3.1 and subsequent submittals. Several changes were made in response to council direction and staff comment as noted in the comment response matrix on line 45. But notable updates to the voluntary concessions include a requirement that 10,000 square feet of commercial space be used as restaurant, a requirement that a maximum of 5,500 square feet of commercial space be available for retail service for the first 5 years, a commitment to construction of retail facades and interior spaces and commercial leasing phased to residential occupancy, including a minimum of 50% of the retail space to be under lease prior to the final floor, approximately 20% of residential occupancy, and a minimum of 75% of the retail space to be under lease prior to the final 5% of residential occupancy. We've included annual contribution to bike share operations of up to $20,000 with 3% annual escalation. There's been an addition of a flashing pedestrian sign at Southwest and Allison Street, and a commitment to all electric appliances in the residential units. As I mentioned before, the table on line 45 outlines council comments that we've received and applicant or staff responses to those comments. If you'd like to go through those, I will. I'll save some time and skip through that. But before I complete my staff report, I would like to go and take a moment to summarize the application that's up for action tonight. Located at 1001 and 1003 West Broad Street, Founders Row 2 is a mixed-use building with a maximum height of 85 feet, comprised of the following uses. It's up to 6 levels of residential multifamily rental apartments, or 280 dwelling units in total, above the ground floor retail. The ground floor retail is 22,278 square feet with frontage of the project along West Broad Street and Southwest Street. Cindy, I'm on line 103. That helps. 5,000 square feet of dedicated co-working space, 409 spaces of underground parking garage, and the building height that varies from 80 feet along West Broad Street to 30 feet along Allison Street. And then on line 128 of the staff report, just to be clear, the land use action that's being requested for tonight is a rezoning. The area currently is zoned T1 and has been requested for rezoning to B1 to allow for consideration of the special exception application. Those special exception applications, there is one to allow residential development within a mixed-use development, and another to allow for the 30 feet of height bonus or 85 feet. And with that, I can turn it back to Mayor Tarter. We have several other members of staff on the call as well as I believe Joe Muffler is standing there in front of you right now. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks. We've seen him, but we appreciate you pointing that out. Thank you for your very fine staff report and your excellent work. We do have a public speaker. I've not forgotten about you. When we get done with the presentation, we will call for public comment. We already have one. Anyone else is certainly welcome to speak at that time, but I have not forgotten. Mr. Muffler, why don't you go ahead? Thank you for your patience.
Great. No, thank you all for having me here tonight. So thank you to Mr. Mayor, council members, to City Manager, Paul, Jeff, and all of City staff for the extensive guidance and patience that they have shown this project, not only over the last 6 months or so since this was referred to boards and commissions, but for the last 2 years. This is a far superior project today than it was when this was first discussed literally 2 years ago, and I'll go into that in a little bit. But I think it's important as we stand here for consideration of approval at the second reading and understand a little bit of the then to now to take a look at this project as a whole. We have spent an extraordinary amount of time on the details because the details are what make the whole. It's the median breaks and the traffic calming and the environmental impacts. It's the voluntary concessions. All of those pieces add up to the whole, and I need to commend, again, everyone in this room, the boards and commissions, and certainly the general public for their continued feedback. I'd like to think that this was a cooperative experience for everyone, that there was a lot of listening and sharing, and again, ultimately what we can show tonight is superior because of that process. So again, I commend everyone who was involved. Cindy, I'm not sure, am I able to drive this now, do you know?
Be able to just point it over here.
There we go. So as we go through this real quick, I do not have many slides. I want to be as economical as possible with your time. You've had a busy night thus far. There are many slides in here. I can touch on any details that you would like. But again, rather than sacrifice the forest for the trees, I do want to touch on what that forest looks like and how we have progressed this project. I went back into my calendar today to see when we first met with the city on this project. It was February 11th of 2020. We were far younger and more naive back then, and I think we've learned a lot over those last 2 years. A lot has changed, and interestingly enough, those lessons have been incorporated into this project. You can see how what we've learned in terms of quality retail, an emphasis on housing, but especially affordable housing, the importance of environmental and really progressing environmental concerns in this project, open space, flexible working spaces. All of that is in here now because of, again, the process that we've gone through. So this is manifest in numerous ways, both in form and in function. Is this working now?
It was, but
It was.
try again.
There we go. So as I click through here again, these are just visual representations of where this project was and where we've come today. So again, it's manifest in form and function, but also in use. The incorporation of open spaces, of central gathering spaces, of street-activated retail, of less density, and increased commercial, of making sure that we're being considerate of the environment, of the neighbors, of the city as a whole. From a numbers perspective, Jeff touched on these, but you can see how the project has changed substantially since November of 2020 to today. And again, that's been a collective process. That hasn't been an echo chamber or a vacuum. It's been a 360-degree feedback process. So I'm proud of where we stand today. I hope that the city is as well. And again, appreciative of the process that we've gone through here. Very quickly, Jeff touched on most of these, but I do want to provide highlights on some of the final VC updates that staff and we have worked through over the last 2 weeks. First and foremost, maybe most importantly, is an alignment of the retail conditions with residential occupancy. You can see how we've staggered this from the first residential CO having storefronts completed in the space, at least half of the storefronts completed. By the time we're at that 51% residential CO, having all the storefronts and shells completed. The final 20% residential COs having 50% of the retail under lease, and the final 10% residential COs, 75% of the retail under lease. That may seem like a lot. It's only 6 months. So from the time we apply for the first C of O till 6 months later, 75% of that retail must be under lease. We've placed additional emphasis on pedestrian safety elements, illumination and definitions of walking paths, streetscape standards, traffic calming measures. We have made a commitment to a bike share. We've clarified some of the retail uses to ensure that we're maximizing the retail plan and the fiscal impact. And then, other kind of odds and ends as well that are also important: garage painting and signage, the all-electrical residential appliance, stormwater improvements. And then the rest of these slides are from our prior work session, but I think they bear repeating. We are preserving, as we have from the start, 12% affordable housing, but we have now added units at the 40% AMI tier and an increased percentage at the 60% AMI tier. So more than half the units will be below 60% or below. The stormwater language reflects today language, not 20 years ago commitments, along with additional environmental commitments to solar and other things as well. The increase in ground floor retail, we've discussed, but essentially today where we stand, if you look at the commercial corridors of Broad and West Street, all but 1,500 square feet is occupied by a commercial use or a parking garage entrance. And that's included a reduction in residential GFA to accommodate that pedestrian pathway on the west side. We continue to focus on pedestrian travel and safety. That was very, very important throughout boards and commissions. A lot of hours spent in conversations on that. A large emphasis on open space and tree canopy coverage, which are significant improvements over phase one, and additional substantial community benefits, which is kind of the slide that I'm going to leave this on, because I think this is the tail of the tape. Outside of the pictures you've seen, which again emphasize the form, the function, the benefits to the city, outside of the provision of additional housing and progress over the existing use, can really be summarized in this chart in the extensive benefits that the city will be receiving. So I have many other slides where we can touch on details, but I said I would be economical, and frankly, I think I've gone a little bit longer. But I did want to also mention the theater agreement that the city manager briefed you all on. That was an extensive process, and I'm glad we went through it. I'm sincerely appreciative of Wyatt and the staff's cooperation on that. Just so you all are aware, and I'm sure you are, the city did engage 2 independent consultants. I provided them true open book records to our rent rolls, our projections, our LOIs. They know this deal as well as I, maybe not as well as I do, but they know the numbers of this deal. We were very transparent because what we wanted to craft, and what I said a couple weeks ago when I came here, was a win-win alignment. I think it should be emphasized, I am not asking, we are not asking rather, for some kind of guaranteed payment. This is not a $340,000, $150,000 payment to Mill Creek just for providing a theater. It is to say that if the theater performs well, if the city is doing well, if the theater's doing well, if the surrounding retail is doing well, Mill Creek can share in that incentive package as well. It was all predicated on an agreement from 6 years ago that concluded at that point in time it was reasonable, given the economics of a theater in this kind of deal, that an incentive plan was sufficient. As I put in my justification letter, given all that has transpired over the last 2 years in the theater industry and the economics associated, I do believe it's more than reasonable now to consider that as well, based on that premise from 6 years ago. But again, I do want to emphasize, it is all aligned to say that Mill Creek participates in the theater success at all levels. If the theater does well, we have the ability to make our money back, not make our money back, sorry, to get a little bit closer, but certainly not where we were before. And we really believe that that's what this has accomplished. So we feel very confident in the theater. There's a lot still going on, but we are committed to working through it and excited about what the future holds for these projects. So thank you for your time. Here to answer any questions.
All right, thank you for yours. So I'm going to open it up to public comment. At the present, we have one speaker. I'm going to ask and call for you, Daniel Polinsky. Thank you for being patient. Please state your name and address for the record and keep your comments to 3 minutes if you'd be so kind.
Yep, thanks. My name is Daniel Polinsky. You said address too? Yeah, 201 Patterson Street. First off, I want to thank Joe for being a good partner in this process. He is frustratingly good at his job. And then secondarily, thank you, council, for, I know we've spoken to many of the council members individually about this project and about the neighborhood concerns. I think there are benefits that the city gets from this project in terms of affordable housing and cleaning up the land that exists there. But when we look at this, or when I look at this project, it is an apartment building. It is a series of new housing with the benefits we get, with the ability to walk, with the pathway at the side, with the affordable housing. It does not actually change the benefit to the city from the commercial standpoint. It is a strip of stores, and it is, I counted yesterday, 19 curb cuts in between West Street and Haycock. This will provide yet another very high traffic, people trying to make a left turn out of the building onto Route 7, or trying to make a left turn while other people are trying to make a left turn into Taco Bell. There have been a lot of very smart people. I've listened to the Citizens Advisory Transportation Council. I've listened to the Planning Commission. I've listened to a lot of these meetings. A lot of smart people have tried to figure out how to make this work. And I think at the end of the day, an apartment building on this corner before we figured out what happens between West Street and Haycock on the south side of the street between now and the time the West Falls Church project is done, there's not a good answer. And I think that is the challenge from this project. As good as Joe has been and as good a partner as he has been in this process, as much as he's listened to the neighborhood, there's no way to say that there is a good way for pedestrians to be safe walking past these parking garages where people are going to be not following rules, but hoping everybody is nice and makes room for left turns and makes room for traffic, at the same time that we're focused on pedestrian safety and having people walk between both Founders Row 1 and 2, and then hopefully eventually the West Falls Church project. So I ask the council really think about what it is the city is getting from this project. I know Mill Creek has been good partners in it, but it is an apartment building that is on a corner, a high traffic corner, where we have not figured out the traffic and where we haven't made pedestrians safe. So my ask is to think about that as you make your final votes and appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate yours. I'm going to call for any other public comment. Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I guess I just want to make sure I hear.
Could you state your name and address for the record, please?
I'm sorry. My name's Joyce Migdal. I live at 603 West Falls Way. And I just want to make sure I hear capital bike share, but those bikes need, for people to use them, they need a safe place. They need to feel safe, not just, the people we refer to as in spandex, but, just average people that would like to bike when they feel safe. And 13 and 14-year-olds, mothers should be able to feel that their kid is safe to bike out of that apartment building to go to high school, to go to the middle school. I just want to know how you're arranging that so that people in that apartment building can not just go to the Giant that's across the street, but so they can go to the Harris Teeter. Maybe, if they go on Park, they got to go through that intersection so they can get to the Aldi. I want to know how those bikes are going to get out there and safe. And, everyone on this council will be comfortable riding their bike from that apartment building to all these great places we have in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, again, I'll call. Is there any other additional public comment? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. We'll open it to questions and comments from council. Questions, comments? Ms. Hiscott?
Thank you. Sorry, with so many topics, there are questions written down everywhere. I had a few questions for clarification from the Environmental Sustainability Council that have come in today. And one of them is regarding what is electric in the building versus gas. One of our prior presentations, I can pull up a slide, it says it's all electric. And I just wanted to clarify, because now it says residential is electric. So if you could clarify, gas, is it intended that gas will be for a generator, commercial? So when you're saying all electric, it's just residential, or what?
Correct, and that was a great catch by staff, frankly. From a commercial perspective, especially 10,000 square feet of restaurant use, we're going to need gas for the restaurant use. There would be limited other gas use, to your point, generator. Those are the two uses, really. It's really a commercial use is why we need the gas. As progressive as we can be on the residential side to ensure that we're bringing in quality restaurants and tenants, we need the gas.
Okay, I just ask that as we, hopefully move forward, that we continue to look at what options we have, whether we can have an electric generator that can support the building by the time it's built, to continue to work on our greenhouse gas emissions goals, which hopefully we'll be refining this summer. We're going to have to continue to look at every way a building could be more environmentally friendly. So the first is additional electric where it can be electric. Secondly, talking about, there were 2 requests from ESC, and some are written, into the secondary code, the 20% energy efficiency goal. That was like part A of it, and then part B was facilitating rooftop solar panels. So on behalf of the ESC, I ask that you work on doing both of those, that there's a 20% energy efficiency and we're doing rooftop solar panels, not combined, but as separate goals to work together, since we're adding in additional gas, like looking at how else we can make it more efficient. So I'm asking for that to be considered moving forward. Then, separate set of questions that came in today about what's organic versus inorganic in our outdoor open spaces, that we're continuing to work on increasing to the extent possible in organic surface level. So tree plantings, we're talking about that in Founders Row 1, and we also want to make sure that that's addressed in Founders Row 2, because there were complaints that there were many residents who thought Founders Row 1 was going to be much greener on that plaza level, and green roofs are great, but the plaza level is where everybody sees the green, and that's where the tree canopy is addressed. And I think we've already talked about these other points that came in, but just ensuring that the lighting on that walkway is appropriate to keep it safe, but also, skylighting, that it doesn't go in too far to the residents. And then lastly, on public art, ensuring that whether it's Arts and Humanities Commission or Falls Church Arts or whomever is involved in making those decisions. So those kind of a recap of additional comments and questions that came in to me today on this project. To the extent you wanted, I don't know that there's anything addressed other than sharing with you those comments.
No,
and the
it's
expectations.
Much appreciated.
Other comments? Ms. Hardy?
Thank you. I think these are questions for staff. So we got 2 email public comments that I reviewed today. In addition to what Debbie said, I think one of the things that came in was around our parking and concern about reduction in parking. On line 570 of the staff report, I believe the reduction results in a ratio of 1.2 spaces per unit. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that is still more than or on par with what we're getting elsewhere. It's a question for CPEDs.
You guys can touch on that. That is less than phase 1. Okay. So phase 1 was parked at 1.3 spaces per unit. I'm not sure how that compares to other parking ratios in the city.
I want to say it was between 1 and 1.3, so that's what, there's the chart. Thank you.
Sure. If I could jump in just briefly, Paul Stoddard, Planning Director with the city. And Cindy, it looks like you're already on it. This is the table there that starts on line 570. This is an analysis that staff's been providing for all these projects, because we know not only how does the transportation network work, but how does the parking storage work is important in all these decision makings. And so this table lays out what are some recently constructed projects. There they are listed on the left column: 301 West Broad, Lincoln and Tinner Hill, Northgate, Founders Row, Broad and Washington, Founders 2. What's laid out in the column on the far right is the number of actual vehicles that are registered in relation to the number of units. So you can see on the top row, 0.92 vehicles, less than 1 car per apartment is registered with the building, and that trend of less than 1 vehicle registered per unit holds for all those projects.
And do we have any reason to believe that that might change at this building?
No, this is also consistent with citywide numbers that we have out of the census that shows that in rental occupied units, I think it's 2/3 of the units have 1 or fewer cars per household. And so there is a trend citywide that in rental units, there's just a lot less car ownership.
Got it. So I think that's responsive to Mr. Quill's concern that we don't have enough parking there. If anything, we might be slightly overparked. And I think the concern from the neighborhoods we often hear is overflow into neighborhoods. I guess 301 West Broad is our best example of that, where it's adjacent to Winter Hill. Have we gotten, I think this last 6 months ago, last asked, have we gotten any complaints about overflow of parking into neighborhoods?
I have not received any complaints in the city manager's office. Mr. Stoddard, I don't know if you have.
We have not. Founders Row 2 was actually an example of getting ahead of the problem. So it is common in other jurisdictions to see that concern about spillover. In Falls Church, when Founders Row 2 was being constructed, One of our staff planners, Jeff Sykes, worked proactively with the community to roll out parking protection to avoid that sort of spillover. There's actually a restriction against overnight parking unless you have a permit sticker specifically for the surrounding residential neighborhood. We've rolled out that same overnight parking protection around the Founders Row 1 project, which is still under construction. And we're already in negotiations with the neighborhood over on Lawton around Broad and Washington so that we can roll that out. And in this application as well, the applicant has offered a voluntary concession of $10,000 that would be needed to pay for the signs, as well as any necessary community engagement to roll out a similar system.
Great, thank you. I think this would be a helpful kind of recap every time we have a project, because I think spillover into neighborhoods and parking is a perennial concern. So that's reassuring, so thank you. The second comment that I think I reviewed from Ms. Henderson was around the Broad and West intersection and kind of traffic queuing and what can be done about that. I think what's proposed by the developer is signal phasing changes. I have been at that intersection pretty regularly, and I've observed that I think DPW might have improved some signal phasing already. Is there more that can be done in the interim until this project, if it gets approved tonight, happens? Or are we getting the complaints like we were, say, a year ago about things queuing up on West?
I think it has improved. Thank you for sharing your observations. And in terms of the split phasing that I know DPW has been discussing, Paul, are you able to converse on that? I'd be out of my depth on that if I were to try to express what I think the engineers are planning.
Yeah, I know the applicant has worked with their engineer to propose some solutions, and I know our engineers have been reviewing their work. And I think generally the city staff engineers do I think in general agree with the conclusions of the applicant that by realigning the intersection as part of the project, the applicant is proposing not only to construct this project, but also rework the streetscape as well as complete the final two legs of that intersection. It would allow for a realignment of the lanes so that it wouldn't be all the southbound traffic goes, then all the northbound traffic goes. They could actually occur at the same time. So you'd have left turns happening at the same time and then straights and rights happening at the same time. And just cleaning that up so that multiple phases of the intersection are running at the same time is, I think, what allows the wait times to go down. So you don't have to wait as long for a red light to cycle through.
But it sounds like that is dependent on redoing the intersection with the project and nothing else that we could do to program that better.
Yeah, we could probably look at it at the interim. I know we have grant funds that could potentially help with that, but those would probably be a couple years out.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it in terms of being responsive to resident concerns that we've had. I did want to clarify something as well. So I know that in the latest VCs, the staff report noted that there is a flashing pedestrian crosswalk at Allison and West. Is that just the speed limit kind of sign, or is it one of the RFBs that I think that we're recommending now?
Correct. And just to be clear, it is the rapid beacon flashing, right?
Great.
And I believe the way the language reads, and Paul can correct me, it's essentially to say, if determined during site plan, as the engineers work together to really figure out what is the best menu of items to optimize, but it's included in there as an option that we would be recommending. So we'll work with the engineers to confirm.
Great. I think as we've learned over time and gotten more sophisticated with pedestrian safety, I think we realize that we don't want to just put out unprotected crosswalks. So the better that we can light them, I think the safer it is. So I would be supportive, and hopefully the engineers will come to that conclusion. That's it for kind of questions. My one last plug, since you've been pretty responsive to all of our concerns so far, is I saw the evolution of the architecture from where we started, say, a year ago to now, and I think everything's really improved. I'm a big fan of the white masonry, so the more white you do, the lighter I think the building feels. And so if that's something that when it gets to the architectural advisory board and you have further iterations, I would support more light colors. Thank you.
Mr. Duncan?
I just wanted to follow up with some of the concerns that Ms. Hardy expressed through the citizen input we've gotten. One thing I think we've learned from the Founders One experience in terms of, the change that it wreaks in the neighborhood. There's just no denying that, we're trying to build a sub-market here with 674 living units, probably 1,000 people. There's going to be some growing pains associated with that. Our experience with Founders One has shown that those community meetings that you had periodically were a good forum for sharing of information. Folks may not be happy, but mainly they don't like to be surprised. If the phasing of the signal is going to change, they want to know how, and they want to know why, and they want to have a email that they can send somebody that lets them know, I think it's great, or I think it's terrible. Those meetings that we had in person before COVID were good. Even the ones that we did online were good. As time went on, the participation, diminished, which I took as a sign that people were, by and large, satisfied. But going forward, if we do go forward, I would ask you all to, deploy yourselves so that the communications element of your work is really an important part of what you do. Not to say that it wasn't done well for Founders One. I think it was done well, but it's going to be that times two.
Yep.
And I would ask that you commit to in the initial phases monthly online meetings, because not everybody has to troop roll around the Beltway to get there, and you can share some information out. Sure. You got an email list already. You're communicating. Mr. Polinsky has been very active in keeping in touch with the neighbors. But just my personal experience living right down the street is that when a change happens, my neighbor tells me about it across the fence and what he and she think of it, and we would look to you all to provide the kind of information and connections. Also, staff, of course. I mean, they're integrally involved in any kind of phasing or timing of the signal change, but that in particular. Other construction-related issues, noise and so forth, all that you dealt with at Founders One, and so it's just more of same, I think. Mm-hmm. I think that's the main thing that I wanted to get across here tonight. If we do go forward, let's be on continued high alert to communicate with the neighborhood. The parking issues that Letty brought up are ones that we've heard for every development that we've done, and by and large, our experience has been pretty good. Some folks think we ought to have less parking. I personally tend to side on the let's be cautious about that and provide enough parking that, number one, the businesses can succeed there, because, keep in mind that this has been a commercial corner for a long time, and it's been a largely unsuccessful corner. Peacock Buick was probably the last functioning business that kept going there, and that was, I think, in the 1940s. So, the carpet store hasn't done too well. The cabinet store was there for a season and passed on. Used to be a McDonald's. People forget there was a functioning McDonald's there, which was not a gourmet specialty, but I did have some kids' meals there when my kids were little. But even it moved up the street. I mean, it's sort of a dead zone. I used to get my car fixed at Sunoco, but they kind of saw the writing on the wall and moved out to, Tyson Station. It just has not been a successful corner, and it needs to be, for the sake of the city and for the sake of the community. People in my neighborhood want to walk to a coffee shop. If there's finally, this is my final pitch, your retail plan, which I know you've written about and we've heard all about it, keep highly focused on that if we go forward. If there's one thing that I hear from everybody, it's, I got to have a coffee shop. Why can't we have a Northside Social on the West End and a convenience store? Why can't I go up like I used to at the 7-Eleven and buy a carton of milk? I know it's just a strip of shops, but don't diminish the importance of a strip of shops to provide everyday needs that keep you from having to drive your car. Right. I'm not biking so much anymore, but I obviously would love to walk up there and patronize businesses that are, successful, hopefully because there's a sub-market of 1,000 other people new to that area, and then all of us who live in the neighborhood near it. So your merchandising plan, your retail plan, keep the neighborhood focused on that, because the inconveniences of the construction, and they're inevitable, will be somewhat leavened by the anticipation of successful businesses up there if the project goes forward tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments? Ms. Conley?
Thanks, Mr. Muffler and Mr. Hollern, for that presentation. It seems like you have answered almost all of the concerns that individuals and boards and commissions have put forward, so thank you for that diligent effort. It seems like the final questions we're getting relate to pedestrian safety, walking, bikes, which is the same concern we have all across the city. So if this project can make that corner safer, as Mr. Polinsky said, he's thinking about all of West Broad Street between there and Haycock. That's not your purview, but it's just something that as a community, we need to keep working at. So I think it sounds like what we're doing is going to make it safer. It's just that, as Mr. Duncan said, we just have to keep reminding people of that, keep having community meetings, keep pointing out how we're making it safer, because for a while it's going to seem unsafe as we go, if this goes forward as we go through construction. And my last question is just about the name. At what point in the process do we get the real name?
If this advances, we will be working on a naming with our partners here, through the site plan process. Same with the pedestrian safety, not to defer, but I mean, that's architecture, pedestrian safety. These are not final. What you see here is not final. We still have an extensive site plan process to go through. So we'll be working through naming as well. Can't promise by the end of it, but we hope to focus on that as well.
Okay, thanks. And I agree with Ms. Hardy that the difference in the original drawings to the current drawings is striking, and the light brick is nice. So let's keep it there. Thanks.
Of course.
Other comments? Ms. Leon?
Yes, I want to reiterate just appreciation for the kind of the back and forth with incremental improvement, right, with each discussion. I think I just want to echo what I've heard, and individuals that have reached out to me, in the community are really around just making sure that traffic study is updated with current volume, and making sure that as your developer response to this matrix from boards and commissions indicates that you're going to work with the city throughout the site plan on traffic inquiries, that you actually do that and commit to making sure that we look at that traffic study and identify opportunities where we need to plug some gaps, right, just due to when the timing of that traffic study occurred. There wasn't a lot of traffic in COVID. So that would be my one request on this, and I appreciate your comment that you put on here as a response, but I just wanted to call that out because it will create more traffic.
Okay. Mr. Snyder?
So a couple things. I do think this project has shown some improvements over time. I think the good elements of it are the percentage of ADUs at 12%, the slightly better commercial elements. I think there's still some fundamental flaws with this project. Number one is the low percentage of commercial at 8.5%, which sets a new low bar for commercial development. Secondly, all the residential units are apartments, and yet we know that we have a missing middle of affordable condos, and I don't see any of those in this project. And yet the missing middle will be used for justification for other things. And I think we need to begin insisting on, in order for these projects to pass muster, to help us deal with the missing middle with condos. My fundamental issue is Founders Row 1. I'm not impressed at the sort of the term sheet so far, particularly the ability unilaterally to sort of extend it. We've seen with Founders Row 1 a consistent pattern of promises not kept with regard to the commercial elements. The theater is not there, even though that was supposedly part of it, and now not only was a major concession granted over my objection during the pandemic, but now even greater give back is demanded by the developer to build the theater that we were promised we were going to have from the beginning. And that's only one element of the commercial. My understanding is that less than 50% of the commercial, or certainly not all of the commercial, is even under memorandums of understanding, let alone leases. So I think it's extremely unwise for the city to give up its leverage by going forward with Founders Row 2. when key elements of Founders Row 1, the fundamental bargain that we had on Founders Row 1, has yet to be complied with by the developer. So the actions that I'll be taking later on will reflect those concerns. Thank you.
All right. Unless anyone else has any other comments, I will go ahead and share mine as well. And they'll be similar to Mr. Snyder's. To me, a threshold issue on our limited commercial land is how are we going to use it? And this project uses less than 9% of it for commercial for purposes. At the end of the day, in my opinion, we need to seek a balanced tax base, one that has a strong commercial component and the residential component as well. But we're not changing that. By having essentially a 91% residential project, we're using our limited commercial land for almost exclusively residential purposes. And at the end of the day, to remain a viable, strong, independent city, we need to have a strong commercial tax base. And this, to me, doesn't add to it. I appreciate the efforts the developer has done and certainly has made progress over time. The number or percentage of affordable housing units is commendable. But to me, a threshold issue is the commercial use of our land, or the use of our commercial properties have a strong commercial use. And the other projects that I have voted for have. They've had grocery stores, movie theater, a lot of very strong and financially accretive uses, which is why we're talking about lowering the tax rate once again. This, to my mind, does not, and so I cannot support it. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Why don't we suggest we go to a motion?
Mr. Mayor, would you entertain a motion?
Yes, of course.
Mr. Mayor, move to adopt TO 21-08 and TR 21-06.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Mayor, I move to table TO 21-08 and TR 21-06 until there's a legally enforceable agreement to produce a theater in Founders Row 1, as well as lease 100% of the commercial space in Founders Row 1. That's my motion.
Okay, so we have the first motion, which is Mr. Duncan's motion, which had a second to approve both items, which I believe we should vote on first. And then we have a second motion, which we may not get to, depending on how the first one turns out.
Mr. Mayor, motion to table takes precedence if it's seconded.
All right, let me ask the city attorney.
I'm not certain. I apologize, but I would imagine Mr. Snyder knows if it takes precedence. Maybe others know as well.
Okay, so in the absence of having conclusive knowledge of how this turns out, it sounds like our city attorney is at least suggesting that is, she thinks most likely the
Yes.
proper procedure.
Yeah.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second on this motion? I'll second it if I'm able to second it. And I guess we'll have a vote on that, city attorney, and then we'll decide whether to go forward on the other motion, depending on the outcome of
Yes.
this motion.
Yes.
Okay. So we have a motion, Madam Clerk?
And
Would you-
we have a motion to
Table?
table with a second,
Yes.
and you would like me to call the vote on that?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Conley?
No.
Mr. Duncan?
No.
Ms. Hardy?
No.
Ms. Leon?
No.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
No.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion fails 5-2, 2-5.
Can I ask a clarifying question for Mr. Shields? So based on the terms that you outlined at the beginning of the meeting, and it sounds like a technicality, so it sounds like it was proposed by Mill Creek, so they've agreed to the terms. It's just in our hands to agree before it's a formal agreement. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So it doesn't sound like that's exactly right, that we don't have an agreement yet. Do we have a term sheet? Are we going to sign the term sheet, or does it have to be turned into an agreement?
It does need to be turned into agreement. So in my response to Councilmember Hardy, I was viewing it as the term sheet reflects the commitments to the terms that the city was seeking in terms of those guarantees and things like that. I was viewing that term sheet then as documenting their acceptance of of those guarantees. So now, in terms of, is the city bound by that? I don't think it's accurate to say because they've submitted this request and signed it, that the city is obligated now to adopt that incentive agreement. But at any rate, the basic terms of it now have been committed to by Mill Creek.
But so I'll ask the city attorney, have they been committed to it, or is it just an offer that isn't really documented or accepted yet?
Well, it is an offer that has not been accepted because the city hasn't had an opportunity to formally act on it and accept it.
So there isn't, I mean, at this point, there's nothing binding on either party. Is that accurate?
That's correct. However, I think we might assume that Mill Creek has made their offer in good faith and would follow through. But you're correct that neither party is bound at this time.
So Joe, I'm looking at you. Do you expect to rescind the offer?
I do not.
Great.
I
Thank
do
you.
not.
That's all I need.
That was negotiated extensively and in good faith. So at this point, we just want to get it done as quick as possible.
All right, Madam Clerk?
And can I confirm the second on that motion? Was it Ms. Leon? The motion to adopt? Yes. Okay, thank you. Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
No.
Mayor Tarter?
No.
Motion carries 5-2. Thank you, council.
All right, congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
All right, let's keep going here.
We have an ordinance on first reading, TO 22-03, ordinance authorizing special assessments and special taxes on property within the West Falls District.
All right, who's doing this?
I will take this one. And before we begin, I will say I've confirmed that that was proper to take the motion to table first. This is a beginning of part of the actions for the Community Development Authority and for the bond issuance. As we've discussed in the past, the CDA bonds that are proposed to be issued to help finance the infrastructure for the property will be paid not out of a tax, unless that's absolutely necessary, but they will be paid from a special assessment. So what the ordinance before you would do is establish the special assessment. And the amount of the special assessment is set forth in an attachment to the ordinance, the special assessment agreement. That agreement will be signed in the end by all the parties so that all of the property owners and leaseholders who will be subject to the special assessment have agreed to it. The total or the maximum special assessment amount currently is set at $33,231,070. That includes $13 million for the principal amount of the bonds, about $16 million in interest over the 30-year period, and about $4 million for administrative expenses. When we get to second reading, the exact amount will be refined. It won't be able to go up, but because we have rising interest rates right now, we have set the maximum amount has been set with an interest rate of 5.5%, which is believed to be at least sufficient to get us through the next couple weeks when the bonds will be finally approved. So that number will be reduced to some degree at the time of second reading. The other things that the ordinance does, and these are in the bullet points, Cindy, maybe you can just scroll down to find the 4 bullet points. It makes the ordinance effective upon recording. It also includes the backup tax that could be imposed if the special assessment is either found to be improper for some reason or is found to be insufficient in any year to pay the debt service and expenses. It also creates a lien for the special assessment on the properties and provides for actions in the case of a delinquency. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Second reading is to be scheduled for April 11th, when all the rest of the CDA and land transaction matters will come back before you.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments? Any public comment? Matter is closed to the public. And what action is required here? Let's take a look.
I make a motion to grant the first reading.
All right. We have
Go
a-
22-03, to schedule public hearing and second reading for April 11th, 2022, and authorized advertisement of the same according to law.
Okay, we have
Second.
Ms. Conley on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscock?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yeah.
Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
All right, let's move on to the consent items. Does anyone wish to remove anything from the consent agenda?
May I remove the consent agenda?
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Hiscott on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscock?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yeah.
Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
All right, let's keep moving. Business not on the agenda. Any standing regional committee council liaisons? Mr. Snyder?
Thanks a lot, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to call council's attention to the proposed responses to the Transportation Planning Board survey on actions relating to transportation and to help address climate risk. Any comments the council has tonight would be appreciated, or later on. These survey responses are due April 1. And Cindy and staff worked on them, and I've looked at them, and I'd recommend them, but we're wanted to get any council comments. We'll also publish them to get any citizen input as well. So that's what I wanted to raise tonight. It's a constant effort to try to bring in all the jurisdictions from Frederick County, Maryland, to Prince William County, Loudoun County, Virginia, and everybody in between to try to move the region forward. So any comments that folks have, please submit them to Cindy and me, and we'll do our best to incorporate them in our survey responses. Yes.
Thank you so much to Cindy and to you for doing the work on that and continuing to carry that forward on the transportation side. On the greenhouse gas goals, I noted the comments were because of the size, because of our size, it's obviously interconnected directly regionally, but just I like how we're stating that we want to take our part in doing what we can on establishing those new greenhouse gas goals and addressing them. So thank you for doing that. I thought the responses looked really good.
I
Okay.
would like to give a lot of credit to Kate Walker, who actually prepared these, and Wyatt and I were supporting her, but she's our key author, so I do want to give her credit for that.
That makes
Thank you.
sense why they were so well written on the greenhouse gas side. Thank you.
All right, other comments? Ms. Hardy?
Thank you. A request for staff. So I'm on the COG Human Services Committee, and their meeting in March was reviewing the regional goal for 320,000 housing units in the next 10 years. And that is currently 75,000 more than what's actually forecasted. So I wanted to understand from our housing staff what our participation in that is, whether we have a number that we're committing to as part of COG, because I think they're also calling that 75% of the new housing needs to be affordable, so for low and middle income. I know the Housing Commission's pushed on kind of housing goals work as well, but I thought between the COG effort and kind of what we're trying to do bottoms up within the Housing Commission, we could find a good place to align and reset some housing goals as part of that regional effort.
Thank you for that report. And I would just note that in the city's comp plan chapter, Housing for Everyone, we did reference that COG work and noted those regional goals and noted numbers in terms of the city's doing its share to meet those regional goals. The COG CAOs have gotten regular updates from housing staff regionally about how we're doing in meeting those goals. I don't have those figures right up. You've probably gotten them more recently than I have. But I will ask staff in terms of any data we're providing COG and to see how the, to inform those regional updates.
Other comments, Ms. Connolly?
I just want to call out the Falls Church Chamber of Commerce for a wonderful celebration last week. The city doesn't give out any business awards, although we used to a long time ago, but the Chamber of Commerce did. So just a quick congratulations to the businesses that they recognized. Lemon Lane Consignment was recognized as the Small Business of the Year, and there was a special tribute to Erin Messner by her husband. The Large Business of the Year was Clarence Don's and Lazy Mike's. Nonprofit of the Year was Nova Scripts. The Company Culture of Excellence was Love and Miller Dentist, and the Pillar of the Community is Rebecca Tax. So it was a very well-done event. There was a new group of volunteers, a lot of familiar faces and friendly faces, new faces, and a good way for the business community to get together. So thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for running that. And I also just want to say congratulations to the Health and Human Services staff, along with Deb Roth, for a wonderful event Saturday morning that has gotten nothing but praise from everyone that I've talked to about the opportunity for people to connect and have tough talks. So hopefully we'll continue that effort within the city as well.
All right, thank you. I think almost all of us attended, so very nice event. Other comments or requests before we adjourn tonight? Anything else? Any last words for anyone? All right, I'll take that as it's time to adjourn. How about that? Let's do it. We are adjourned.
Minutes.
What? Oh, minutes. Okay, let's do the minutes. Sorry. Phil?
Sorry.
I reviewed the minutes of March 14th and did not find anything. Anybody else?
Okay, do we have a motion regarding the minutes then?
Move to approve the minutes of the meeting of Monday, March 14th, 2022.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. Now, anything else? Any last words for anyone?
Move to adjourn.
All right, let's do it. We're adjourned.